various other. So the influence of these major corporations in the economy, the multi-billion-dollar businesses, extends also to the influence they exercise directly in the media. DuPont owns the chains of newspapers. Copley, Sulzberger, Punch Sulzberger of the New York Times. Old man Sulzberger has a computer. He's retired now. His son is even more conservative than he is. Has a computer on his desk and would call up every day the editorials that are going in the next day. This idea that you talk to editors, they won't give you this. Are you telling me I have you know that I'm completely independent? Well, you work for Sulzberger, you'll find out something different. He can call up the editorials every morning, every afternoon for the next morning, and he will change. If anything he doesn't like, boom, he beeps in, and he'll even look at the front page. And if he doesn't like a story, he'll say, kill it, or put it back, cut it, this, that, the other thing, spike it. And that goes on all the time. Top-down control of information and news. Now, reporters, Rupert Murdoch, by the way, was interviewed. I saw an interview of him in Vanity Fair. It was very interesting because they said to him, you know, he's buying up news media, TV stations, radio stations, and they say to him, well, you're known as a right-wing conservative. Do you have your opinions? Do you allow your opinions then do you exercise an opinion influence over your publications? And I thought the guy was going to say, no, I respect the autonomy and professionalism of my editors and journalists and all that. He said, of course I do. He said, I'm not
yes, it is.
I'm a radical
you don't have to hop in the StreamYard. You can.
Conservative than that. He said, and you bet. He says, the buck stops with me, yes. Do you leave your conservative influence on your publications? And he says, yes, indeed. Reporters and editors who don't comply with that eventually run into problems. Reporters worry about getting their copy cut. They get passed over for promotion. They get reassigned to, some Siberia desk or something, and they get off the juicy stories, or they don't get them, whatever else. And they have these problems. Oddly enough, if you talk to most reporters, most of the reporters I know who have given me stories about censorship, about top-down control and all, are ex-reporters. They're often people, I began noticing, well, I used to work for Associated Press, or well, I used to work for CBS, well, I used to. The ones who are still in there absolutely vehemently deny that there's any such thing like this. They get very indignant. They say, the minute you move too far, and you have no sensation of a restraint on your freedom. I mean, you don't know you're wearing a leash if you sit by the peg all day. It's only if you then... So you're free because your ideological perspective is coterminous with, congruent with that of your boss. So you have no sensation of being at odds with your boss, you see. Others will tell you, though, yeah, you can be censored. Others will say you have to have very finely attuned antenna to just how far you can go or not go, and otherwise you'll run into trouble. Necessarily come down and say, you write what I like, and if you don't do that, although I have examples of a few choice cases like that where the owner says, you will not say anything negative about any Republican candidate. That will not be allowed in the press during the entire campaign. That you will not say anything positive about any Democratic candidate. I mean, sometimes you get that, but generally that isn't the way it works. What will happen is somebody will mosey over to you at the water cooler and say, don't get over involved in your story here, or you don't run off becoming a cause person, or you got to be objective. And objectivity means taking the world as officialdom says it is. Objectivity means not bringing up troublesome information that might cause discomfort to people of power and position, especially economic power, especially big corporate advertisers who pay our bills and the like. Nicholas Johnson, former commissioner of the Federal Communications Commission, said there are 4 stages that journalists go through. In the early stage, you're a young crusader and you write a expose story about the powers that be, and you bring it to your editor, and the editor says, no, kill it, we can't touch that. Too hot. Stage 2, you get an idea for the story, but you don't write it, and you check with the editor first, and he says, no, it won't fly. No, I don't think the old man won't like it. Don't do that. He has a lot of friends in there, and that might get messy. Stage 3, you get the idea for the story, and you yourself dismiss it as silly. Stage 4, you no longer get the idea for that kind of an expose story. And I would add at stage 5, you then appear on panels with media critics like me, and you get very angry and indignant when we say that there are biases in the media and you're not as free and independent as you think. And those biases, as I'm saying, are not liberal biases. They actually move in a conservative direction. Another control besides these rich conservative owners, overwhelmingly all of whom are conservative Republicans, is the advertisers. Advertising, I mean, you know, they say journalists are people who write on the back of advertisements. And look at your, if you think that's such a joke, look at your newspaper next time and just do a rough content analysis. You're turning the pages. How much of it is actual copy and how much of it is advertising? How much of it is news copy and how much of it is advertising copy? Sulzberger, Norman Bauman did a study, and he quoted Sulzberger as saying, for years the New York Times could not write a story that was critical of the automotive industry, that it was unsafe and this and that. A young lawyer, about almost 30 years ago now, a young lawyer in Washington did an expose, an investigation of automobiles. He wrote up a whole expose about how unsafe they were, how dangerous they were, everything from dashboards to visibility. He couldn't get that story published in a single major media. His name was Ralph Nader. Nobody had ever heard of him, but the story was interesting. He had to publish it in a little obscure magazine called Fact Magazine. Then it got picked up here, got picked up. He finally wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, which became a bestseller. So then Congress couldn't ignore it, and they had hearings and all that sort of thing. But he couldn't get it in. And one of the people, Sulzberger was a typical example. He had a rule, nothing in the New York Times that's critical of the automotive industry ever. Why? He was very clear. They are our biggest account. Ford, GM, and Chrysler were our biggest account in those days. This was before Toyota and Japanese took over much of it. Todd Gitlin interviewed network bosses, NBC, CBS, and he talks to when he records an interview he has in one of his books, and he asked the guy, do advertisers influence the content of your TV shows, programs? You know, and again, I thought the guy was going to give the usual blather. Well, it's a pressure we could feel now and then, but we have our professional standards and we keep our autonomy and all that. I thought that's what he was going to say. He said, you betcha, absolutely. Hey, yes, all the time. Are you kidding? Of course, they pay the bills. Yes, sir, we always check with them on things. And I'll give you some examples later on when I talk about the entertainment industry. So when people talk about a free market of ideas in our democracy, please remember that it's not a free, that conjures up an image of a lot of little bazaar, stalls at a bazaar. You know, when you walk along and you can choose something from this one, choose from that, or choose from the other. It's more like the free market of commodities in America, which is a market that's highly controlled by a small number of giant producers with other things left really at the margin, and that's pretty much it. If you've got the billions of bucks, you can break major audiences. If you don't have it, you can't. You will find if you do anything, whether you write something or you put a film together or whatever else, in a capitalist system, they'll sell you the typewriter, they'll sell you the computer, they'll sell you the video camera, they'll do all that, and you can make whatever you want. The trick then is getting distribution. And that becomes the hard thing, and you'll find that the channels of distribution are controlled by very big people, and they will decide. The trick also sometimes is in doing the story, raising the funds to be able to make whatever the documentary or the movie you might want to do. But in that sense, it's not a free market. Those who expend vast amounts of capital will be able to reach mass audiences, those who have access to vast amounts of capital. And that becomes a form of censorship, market control. In addition, I would say the political culture itself, the dominant political culture, is not a neutral entity. It is something that is developed by schools, by universities, by government, by the social sciences, and by the media. And the media finds confirmation for the images it propagates in the images that it's already propagated. And so what you've got really is this background, this accumulated reservoir of images, which, by the way, I think much of what we call culture is that, the impacted, accumulated reservoir of images that are produced not by neutral institutions, but by very powerful and interested institutions. It's what Alvin Gouldner called the background assumptions, or Carl Becker called it, Becker called it the climate of opinion back in the 30s. That's become an ordinary term now, but it was his original concept, I think. And the argument was that anything you see, any bit of information you see, the persuasiveness, your readiness to accept it, depends less on the data and the argument that's made than on whether or not it is congruent with the background assumptions that you already have about what is okay and what isn't okay. In other words, what I'm saying is that supply creates demand. That it's not just, we always think of demand creating supply, it often works the other way around. Something you might think about. I was being interviewed in Seattle, Washington, and a radio journalist says, well, if there were progressive, iconoclastic, more critical viewpoints, and if the people were interested in hearing them, they would hear them, and then these other publications would sell more. Why doesn't, say, The Nation sell more? It's because people aren't interested in reading it. And if you had a winning formula, you'd be okay. I said, well, you know, back during the turn of the century, there was McClure's, there was a number of muckraking magazines that these fighting journalists had published, and they were getting tremendous circulation. And the guy who was also there, some mainstream academic communications guy, said, well, heck, if those things were there and they knew they could make a buck on it, they would go out there and produce those magazines and sell them. I said, no, they wouldn't. Not if those magazines were writing things that were embarrassing to their interests. Those muckraking magazines, in fact, were embarrassing to the interests of the powers that be, and J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller came along, and Mellon came along, and he bought them all up and said the people are tired of muckraking and exposés about the rich and powerful, bought the magazines all up and totally changed them or closed them down, fired all the editors and staff, and revamped them. And that's what happened. And The Nation magazine, as I explained to that journalist, I said, the reason why USA Today can, in 2 years, become the third biggest selling national newspaper in the country is that Gannett was behind it. And Gannett put in hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So that suddenly, in a few months, you had on every corner a little magazine distributor rack there when you get USA Today. Most Americans have never even heard of The Nation. I will wager, I won't ask for a show of hands, I will wager there are even some people in this highly informed audience who have never heard of The Nation. And The Nation has been around for over 100 years. But the difference is that The Nation doesn't have hundreds of millions of dollars to make mass market outreaches and do that sort of thing. So that supply is one of the things that helps create demand. The first condition of all consumption is the accessibility of the commodity. You could ask any business person or any marketing person, if you think you're going to just produce something and just sit there and wait for the public to beat a path to your door and buy the thing, you're wrong. You then have to go out and give it visibility and make it accessible. I remember the soft drink industry. When I was a kid, soft drinks, they were called soda pop in those days. Soda pop was considered something not very healthy for you. It was something you drank maybe at picnics or ball games or something, or a birthday party, you'd have some. And with the advent of television in the early 1950s, the soda pop companies started calling themselves soft drinks, and they started advertising on TV, and they started showing family-sized bottles. and getting them into the supermarkets. And suddenly there were dispenser machines that you could find in the lobby of any bank, any school, any place in the world. They're everywhere, right? And the sales of Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and all those drinks went skyrocketing up. There'd be shots of ads and TV. You'd see families sitting together with these big Pepsi-Cola bottles, drinking it with their food. I mean, I don't know, I'll bet, again, no show of hands, but I'll bet some of you are guilty of that. Drinking that rot gut soft drink, the stuff that rots your guts and your teeth, drinking it. It's gone from a novelty drink to a staple. I mean, it's become a national drink, sort the soft drinks are. That, my friends, was done by, not because people, something happened to, there was a funny generation that came along in 1950, they just got a craze for soft drinks. Oh, I'm going to have more of it. That was done by deliberately changing the tastes of the American public, and changing the taste by exposing them to a whole set of images and accessibility, of making the supply create the demand, by making that supply so imminent and so right there up front, in front of people, until they get hooked on the sugar in it and they drink it like maniacs, you know. All right. I disapprove of soft drinks, I just want you to know. It's often nice to make that point. If you're talking in a class, it's often nice to make that point, because invariably, or if it's a lecture hall where you have those, you know, those armrest seats where you take notes, invariably there'll be one or two cans, and I could point them out, and you see the person starts to squirm and giggle and all that sort of thing, but nobody brought a soft drink in, huh? So we won't. They're probably under the seats there somewhere. There also, I would say, is very little ideological diversity in the media, despite the fact that you have a great variety of outlets. You have a lot of newspapers. You go across the country, you find the same columnists in all these newspapers, and the same commentators, and they are overwhelmingly conservative. They're the same thing on TV. John McLaughlin, a right-wing commentator, has 3 TV shows. One in the networks and one in PBS, or 2 in the networks, 1 in PBS. William Buckley, Pat Buchanan, George Will, Evans and Novak, with a sprinkling on the left being people like Michael Kinsley. That's about as far left as you go. Kinsley once turned to Buchanan and said, a moment of great truth, I thought. He said, "I'm not as far left as you are far right." And I said, yay, that's for sure. That there's the political spectrum is pretty much amputated at around center. It's really center versus right. And witness the fact, for instance, that almost all the debate on major policies are debates of the center versus the right. The health plan today, the whole health plan debate is between those who want Clinton's managed competition and those who don't want anything very much at all, on the Republican right. And the single payer stuff has just been ruled out. It was declared at the beginning it won't have a chance. It's just defined, even though polls showed that overwhelming majorities of Americans would go for a single payer Canadian type plan once they know what it's about. And often there is an appearance of diversity. You may get 2 people debating a subject. McNeil Lair, they'll say, here we have 2, you know, Elliott Abrams versus Sam Nunn on defense. Sam Nunn, who says we've got to keep a strong military and keep the spending at this level. Elliott Abrams, who says we've got to spend yet even more. And some of us sit there and say, what about the guy who says we should have drastic cuts with major conversion plans to convert this to civilian economy, where so many things need to be done, where so many things need to be built, a rational mass transit system, and this and that, you know, reallocation of tens of billions of dollars. You don't hear that. That guy is cut off. Nightline once had Richard Burke and Richard Pearl on, one of them supporting the Reagan hardline anti-communist policy, another one saying it wasn't hardline enough and was getting soft toward the Russians. McNeil Lair now does have one.
I'm muted. There we go. All right, we'll get the hang of this. But welcome to another episode of Subversive History. I think this would be our first real episode, right? The let's call it 0 episode that we had last time was a little bit more of like, you know, this is who the hell we are. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to cover, right? And for this one, we're going to be way more on topic. And our topic of today is going to be Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality. We're gonna try and at least cover like the first chapter. Right, you can hear me?
No, I can't hear you. Is it?
There you go. So
okay.
Our first episode, yeah. Hopefully, we don't have too many like tech issues going on, but yeah, we're gonna go over Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality. What's good?
What's up? Hey, Stu.
Yeah. Hey, Stu's #1 fan. And let me pull this up. So, what did you find interesting about like this first chapter of Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality? And like first of all, I think we should talk about like just the value of Michael Parenti in our lives. Do you want to go first, Pat?
Sure. I mean, speaking more broadly to just like the influence that Parenti has, the political influence that Parenti has had on me specifically, as someone that was like into a lot of like punk rock music when I was, in my early teens, there is a punk band, Choking Victim, that samples Michael Parenti's speeches. So I was a little bit familiar with it way before I was ever really introduced to the political sphere, in an extremely distant way. Like I was not a very politically aware individual. And then I started, developing a broader understanding of politics. And when I came across Parenti, it inspired something very, a young memory of hearing these speeches in these Choking Victim songs. So I immediately became pretty interested in him, and he came at an extreme recommendation from a close friend of mine who was more politically educated than I was. Really, I was not much of a reader in my adult life. I was not much of a politically minded individual. And one of the first books that I read to educate myself on politics and kind of dive into the political realm was Black Shirts and Reds by Michael Parenti. That was really the first book that I had read in years, potentially a decade. So sometimes when people ask me my political affiliation, even though he's not so theoretical, I almost want to refer to myself as a Parentiist, because I've read more Parenti than I've read Marx. I've read more Parenti than I've read Lenin. I'm someone who is extremely influenced by his books. I probably own more books. I might own more books by Vijay Prashad than I do Michael Parenti, because they're easier to come by. But Parenti and Prashad are the two dominant forces on my bookshelf.
I think that the first time I was ever introduced to Michael Parenti was my friend Ethan, who I met through this other podcast called Pearls of the Round Table. And right. He, suggested looking at like this video, right, of this guy, right? But like the video, like it's all yellow, right? And it's like the 1985 or something speech that he gave, right? This impassioned Italian American man.
We're gonna chat.
This impassioned like Italian American man. Especially the part where he starts talking about like how he wrote a book and he dedicated it to his dad, and how his dad, couldn't read, the book. I guess, I don't know to what degree, his father was literate or not, but like
functionally illiterate.
I still watch that sometimes, and it makes me cry. And like, hearing him talk about like, the revolutions that like feed the kids, the revolutions that like, that teach the kids how to read and teach the adults how to read, and how to like expand their world around them, right? And how to expand like that internal world within themselves to be able to express themselves greater as a person. Like I was just like, I'm sold. Like everything about this guy, it's just like I couldn't get enough. And I've been addicted to anything that Michael Parenti has written or said since, and he's been like a huge as big an influence on my worldview as like my parents, honestly.
Communist grandpa.
He's like the grandpa that like gives you like a $20 bill at the family gathering. He's like, here, buy yourself something nice. Like,
yeah. I think, and what you're bringing up there is actually something that is so important regarding Parenti, as opposed to maybe a lot of other political scientists or political analysts, is like the intimacy, you know, when he speaks, the ability, he doesn't feel like a distant academic or someone that like is talking down from you from the ivory tower of academia. He feels like somebody that you could know from your neighborhood. And he's humorous when it's time to be funny. And also he can like be screaming in times of like passion, and he's able to fluctuate between these different modes of emotion to really capitalize a message. And I think that's what makes him resonate so significantly with so many people, is that he's adorable at times, he's impassioned at times, he's hilarious at times, and then also you combine that with just having a concise and well thought out and well educated, well read opinion, or should I say factual basis, and opinions on political economy.
Yeah, I mean, like that's
what makes Parenti so great.
Yeah, and like I don't know, it's kind of honestly like after having read as much Parenti, right, and listened to as much Parenti, he's not only the anti-Ben Shapiro, Jesus, but like I've tried reading Zizek, and I've tried like, you know, watching a lot of Zizek. It's entertaining, but like when you know more about whatever like topic that like, you know, the person you're expecting like a well-sourced, well-researched, like, you know, opinion on, or they're extrapolating something from that, you expect them to be well read on it, and like I'm telling you, he's not. I'm telling you right now that like Michael Parenti, when he talks about something, like he's read about it, he's read into it, and not even just like, you know, sources that are like feelings care.
Comparing a Hegelian's philosopher with a political scientist, though. I mean, kind of apples to oranges. So I don't. I would.
But that's the thing, is that like he tries to like marry materialist, you know, analysis, right? And this like weird metaphysical like bullshit together, and like it's not going to synthesize. It's oil and water. It might like taste great on the right thing, but
I do my best not to take shots at people with multiple doctorates. You know what I mean? When I'm, you know, from where I sit, you know, I would have to do a lot more research to contend with him on a lot of things. So
that actually goes into you know, what we're going to talk about today, and you know, it should make you really question why somebody like Zizek, you know, even though he has rarely more than like a cursory surface level of investigation into the topics that he talks about, right? Why Parenti, right, is really like, you know, hitting a banger as early as like 1985, right? With inventing reality, and like, you know, the reason why there is such a skew on what kind of people get to be in the news, get to have articles written about them, get to, you know, express their opinion to the rest of the world. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? And yes, I'm going to share a link about what materialist analysis is, but we're going to try and stay on topic for, you know, like inventing reality.
Okay. So was your specific question, did I want to talk about why certain individuals are selected to speak in media?
Yeah, like what influences like who gets to have airtime, or who gets to, you know, write the articles that get published in like, you know, the Washington Post or the New York Times?
Well, I want to get there, but I don't want to, you know, jump the gun too much. I think that like there's probably like a linear process that prior to who, it's kind of like how, you know what I mean? And how has media consolidated over the past century, I think is the prescient matter here. And I think that that's central to Parenti's, the first chapter of Inventing Reality, correct?
Yeah.
I don't know if you took any specific notes regarding that process, or if there's anything that you have clipped from the specific chapter that illustrate that.
Well, the first chapter is literally titled, From Cronkite's Complaint to Orwell's Oversight, right? And, I think that there are some people, obviously I'm hoping that anybody watching this already is aware of, who Orwell is. I don't think as many people are going to be aware of, his history as a...
We're going to talk about Orwell. I have actually quite a bit of information queued up on Orwell. He's going to be used as a big example of some of the topics that I want to cover.
But as far as who Walter Cronkite was, right, there was a time in news, right, where commentary was actually the exception, not the rule. It's hard to watch any kind of journalism, whether it's on TV or it's on YouTube or anywhere you get news. Right, it's hard to get it without any kind of commentary about from who's writing it, from their perspective and what they believe and what their slant is, right? And at the time of Walter Cronkite, he had a saying that and that's the way it is, or some other nonsense that he writes about it. But near the end of his tenure with let me see here. I have it written down. I have too much written down. That's what I have. Right? Walter Cronkite would end his CBS television news show with the statement, "And that's the way it is." On the eve of his retirement, 1980, Cronkite admitted that isn't the way it is. My lips have been kind of buttoned for almost 20 years. CBS News doesn't really believe in commentary, right? So Walter Cronkite was at one point the most trusted source of information for most of America, right? And here he is talking about how it's not actually what was happening behind closed doors, right? And Michael Parenti writes that it's easy to keep those buttons closed, when your 10-year contract with CBS went for $20 million, and this is in 1980. So if you want to break out your inflation calculators, that's quite a bit of money, a sum that has been known to ease the pain of buttoned lips. So
sure. So I think it's important to kind of lay down a foundational structure of what media is. You know what I mean? This concept of inventing reality, of fabricating opinions and understandings and viewpoints and perspectives of a population and manipulating public opinion so that it can be tailored to political ends or some other type of nefarious goal. We need to, if you asked what is the purpose of mass media? What is the purpose of a media outlet? And I think a lot of people would suggest that to provide news, to give updates on to give information to the public. And what's extremely important here, or is essential to understanding this process, is that we live in a capitalist system, in a capitalist mode of production. And in that system, anything that is commodified exists solely to generate profit, as opposed to being a generalized public good for the benefit of the public so that they can make informed decisions on topics. So in capitalism, much like with any other commodity, it trends towards monopoly. And this has been happening all throughout the history of capitalism. So when a system commodifies media, and media is a commodity, and it may be perhaps the most nefarious commodity because of the effect that it has on public opinion and public culture, becomes so commodified and so profit driven, it loses any kind of relevant objectivity and eventually has a distorting, fabricating, and inventing effect on reality as it relates to those that consume it. And I see, Seacrum, I see your comment there about manufacturing consent. Manufacturing consent and inventing reality are essentially synonymous terms. And both Parenti and Chomsky have wrote diligently about this topic, and I would say that they have a fairly incestuous kind of relationship on the topic. So I would recommend Manufacturing Consent. Absolutely. I would also recommend Inventing Reality. I'm much more partial to Michael Parenti myself, just through my own research purposes. So that's why we're covering this one. And this one actually came out first. Also, I think it's important to note that prior to Manufacturing Consent, Parenti did publish Inventing Reality.
And to all my fellow Parenti heads, look, if you read Inventing Reality, he actually cites both Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky a number of times throughout it. So chill.
Absolutely, yeah. We're here to build bridges between Chomskys and Parentiists. Did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? Like just in kind of like this like general landscape of capitalist media, the commodification of media, the primary goal of existing for profit, and how that leads to a atmosphere of invented reality?
Oh, absolutely. So like in the first chapter, he cites like, you know, exactly, he defines exactly what he's going to interchangeably call like news media, right? Or US press or national media. And he refers to Columbia Broadcasting System, right? Which is now owned by Paramount Global. He refers to the National Broadcasting Company, NBC. This is now owned by Comcast. The American Broadcasting Company, now owned or called ABC, now owned by, of all things, Mickey fucking Mouse, Disney, right? New York Times is still owned by the same Ox Soldberger family, right? And the Washington Post, which we should all know is owned by Jeffrey Bezos. You know, and he goes on to say that, like, you know, far more insidious and less open to conscious challenge are the notions that fit to the dominant political culture field of established images, that they appear not as biased manipulation, but as, quote, the nature of things, right? And I think that, like, you know, this is his, like, dialectical method of thought, you know, coming to light, you know, when he's talking about things as a thesis, antithesis, and causing a synthesis, you know, when they come up, right? Because he goes on to say, when exposed to a view that challenges the prevailing message, the reader is not then simply burdened with additional distortions. A dissident view provides us with an occasion to test the prevailing beliefs, open ourselves to information that the mainstream media and the dominant belief system have ignored or suppressed. Through this clash of viewpoints, we have a better chance of moving toward a closer approximation of the truth. So, you know, and then he even goes on to say, like, also, like, any liar, the press is filled with contradictions. Come on, man. You can't be talking about contradictions and not be like, you know, yeah, I've read a little bit of Marx, you know?
Yeah. While you were going through some of those media acquisitions and the consolidation over times, I brought up this, this is kind of like a pretty common analysis of that you might see around the internet sometimes. This is an illustration of media consolidation over time. It's something called Frugal Dad put it together. This is from Insider Magazine, I believe it is. And so it's a pretty mainstream source that is corroborating this. This isn't like a extremely like niche or conspiratorial view. This goes through the facts that in 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. And now, kind of like what Johnny was rattling off earlier, 2011, the same 90% is controlled by only 6 companies. Further illustrated down here, between GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS, essentially own and control the vast majority of the media that we consume. You can go down, there's further things. I'm not going to read through every single I'm not going to go through every single one of these, you know, little slides here. I can obviously link this in the chat for anybody that wants to do a little bit further of an in-depth reading of this. A couple that I did feel somewhat interested in was that News Corp, the corporation, owns the top 3 newspapers on 3 separate continents. This is the consolidation of radio. 80% of stations playlist match. That's 32 years of back-to-back nonstop play. So this kind of like even shows like an artistic consolidation as a result of media consolidation, which I think is funny because there's a lot of times that maybe socialist countries are, accused of not producing any kind of like relevant art or not like allowing that kind of artistic innovation. And this just kind of illustrates the dilution of the distillation of the art form as a result of media consolidation and for-profit media. Continuing down, you can look at it with movies, the mergers, and here's like the source for it. One thing that I will throw out is that this is from 2011, and there has been some changes since this, so this might not be 100% accurate. So I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. If they're going to be using this as a resource, just make sure that you dig through it a little bit, because some things have changed in terms of ownership and things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to go through that real quick. Johnny, did you have anything to add regarding this?
There's a 3-minute video by Pew Research Center that I wanted to throw up. It's in the chat if you want to throw that up for me. The pointer, "Do Americans Trust the News Media?" video.
Yeah, I got you. Give me just a sec.
Also, I mean, I think it's somewhat important, at least either before or after this video, whenever that. Okay, here we go. Are we gonna watch the whole video?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
Johnny, do you want to watch the whole thing? It's only 3 minutes.
Yep.
So here, let me pause our music real quick.
Trust in America, in institutions, in each other is essential to the functioning of U.S. democracy. Yet today, trust is declining.
Chat, let us know if you can or cannot hear the audio of the video.
In this episode, Katerina Ava Matza and Lee Rainey help explain trust in the news media and how Americans evaluate news.
You guys said you can't hear it?
Pat, you can't hear it?
Sources.
No. Okay. The chat can hear it. That's what's
declining. Our work shows that people are less trustful of major institutions, including the news media, than they used to be. And your team has documented a lot of this broad change that's occurred.
The news media as an industry has undertaken a lot of changes. First, the way people get news today has changed from 10 years ago, from 20 years ago. We've seen that online news consumption is up, and it's at this point even more than television. Second is the news media industry's business model. We've seen that many news organizations are now changing their revenue streams, focusing now more on digital ad revenue. The third element has to do with political identity. We see that Republicans and Democrats place their loyalty and their trust in very different sources. The fourth development is misinformation. The challenges that Americans are facing parsing through the news online is in this new environment of misinformation. The large share of Americans saying that made up news creates confusion, and it's really a big problem for society.
It's true that social media now has added an extra layer of complexity to the issues that news consumers and news producers are grappling with. And it almost gets back to the very foundational question. We ask, do you trust the news media? And a lot of people answer no to that question. But then to unpack that idea, and Americans are equally comfortable sort of saying, yes, I really like and I really trust some sources, but not others. And so in a way, their trust has become disaggregated and divided.
One of the things that we've seen is that idea of personal connection with a journalist or a news organization. We see that matters. When we ask people whether their media represent them, whether the journalists that they talk to are embedded in the community, that's where we see big differences in how people evaluate the media. People that say that they've talked to a journalist or they see themselves in stories, they're going to have more positive evaluations of the news media.
People have lots of news sources that they trust, but they don't think that the institution of the news media and the industry of news organizations as a whole is trustworthy. So people tend to go to sources of information that map with their point of view. And we see in our data, Americans don't trust each other the way they used to. They don't think Americans share the same facts that they used to. And so the charge to people who are in the thick of this new environment is to figure out how to help people find their way to the truth and not make it a hard job. And Americans couldn't be clear about that. They want to know what's going on, and they want help doing it. And they are looking to journalists to help solve these problems.
So remember what Parenti said,
You have a big echo.
Oh, I do?
Yeah.
Damn. How about now?
Yeah, you sound better now.
All right, good. So, remember what like Parenti said like not too long ago about like, facing these contradictions and getting a closer approximation of the truth, right? We should try and think about like what causes like, these ruptures in public trust with the news media in the first place. And that's pretty much what this entire book is about, is like, what actually causes these divisions, right? Within news media, right? Within the media and where people get their news from, right? Because, especially for our generation, especially for like, people that like live in the post 9/11 world, right? I think that the great push for American exceptionalism, like we haven't seen since, I don't know, even World War II, right? Should be like the, greatest element as to like, why we are where we are today. I think that like it's important that like from a Marxist perspective, right, that we keep the continuity of events, because things don't just happen from out of nowhere, and everything has like a line of continuity from a previous event, right? So as far as like people having this distrust in the media, right, we could go in a conspiratorial direction, or we could just go into like the very partisan element that a lot of media fell into after that, because I doubt that like the level of partisan bias, right, existed prior to 9/11 that you would have found between like CNN or Fox News. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there were competing brands, but I don't think that like you would have seen like the level of like just vilification between the two of them. But it really doesn't matter, because like at the end of the day, like they discuss or what's discussed in this book is how much do the editors really disagree? How much do like the people that own these companies, these entertainment companies, how much do they disagree about what is actually like being pumped out there? Honestly, seeing dialectics as a way of parsing the continuity of our history makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think it's interesting in that video that it said that like this major segment, or this major plurality of the population doesn't trust their news. And maybe that can be reflected in opinion polls. But the fact of the matter is that when it really comes down to it, the public opinion largely does reflect the narratives of the news media, the major news media networks. So like, even though people are like, we don't trust the media, and there's like partisan influence in media, really underlying all of that, in the background of all that, is a dominant hegemonic narrative of liberalism, of a Western perspective of foreign policy. So like, even though like CSNBC, MSNBC, and Fox can bicker at one another on trivialities and issues that are stimulated very, very short issues, behind that is like almost a ubiquitous capitalist line, liberal line, Western-centric view of the rest of the world. So I think what is important, and I know that you just brought this up regarding conspiracy. Do you think this would be an appropriate time to kind of like tackle like the more conspiratorial angles of covering this topic, and maybe legitimize at least our perspective of this from like a relatively informed leftist portrayal, as opposed to kind of like more generally weaponized and problematic critique of media?
Yeah, I mean, take it away. Just remember that, like, as Pat is talking about this, that like the media, right, is a capitalist entity, right, working with a capitalist country. I don't know how many different politicians need to say it, like Nancy Pelosi saying we are capitalists, right? So just remember that, like, while Pat is talking about this, that like it's hand in glove One operates in unison with the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. So this is not only going to serve as so give me 1 second. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So the reason that I bring this up is because I feel like it is an extremely, you're going to hear this very often in very wide segments of society, just kind of like what was reflected in that Pew Research data, that people don't trust the media. So when we cover this topic, we want to make sure that we make a clear distinction between the way that we're covering it and the very vague, kind of half-baked conspiratorial claims that are so frequently espoused by problematic individuals and otherwise uneducated individuals. You can hear things like this from, QAnon people will talk about the media. Anti-Semites will talk about the media in this way. The stoner guy in the basement with the tinfoil hat who like vaguely alludes to like they and what they don't want you to know. Real material or like concrete foundation for any of those conspiratorial beliefs. We want to make sure to separate ourselves from that. So what I want to do now is kind of go through a history of evidence that supports this narrative of media unscrupulously disseminating false information to manipulate public opinion. So not only is it going to provide evidence for that claim with very real world and documented events, but also it's going to be also very illuminating with how the State Department narratives are channeled and proliferated through major media sources. So the first thing I wanted to bring up here, and this is actually going to be pretty good because I actually have a PDF of this book, which I think that it might be nice if anybody wants to read it themselves. It's a book called Inside the Company by an individual named Philip Agee. I'm not entirely positive if I'm pronouncing his last name right, and I apologize for that. So Philip Agee is a I just saw this, Alex Jones. Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, this is exactly, thank you so much, Tycrum, for, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. Correct. This is so correct that this is what I'm trying to distinguish the leftist perspective of this versus like what someone like Alex Jones, because you might hear a similar sentiment coming from both sides. So that's why I think it's really important to like illuminate that and make it, distinguish between the two. So thank you so much for bringing it up. I actually wish that I thought to bring up Alex Jones and I neglected to. So you bringing that up is so on point with this. So if you look in there, I did share the PDF for Inside the Company, which is written by an ex-CIA agent, Philip Agee. And among many other topics, he does make a specific description of how the CIA does, in fact, utilize propaganda to influence public opinion. So just to kind of go into this a little bit, he details how the CIA utilizes various forms of propaganda, and they have a color coding system for this. They have white propaganda, which is openly acknowledged as coming from the US government. So that's not like anything shady or behind the scenes necessarily. But then we go into what's called gray propaganda, which according to Philip Agee, ex-CIA.
Like a gray Jedi.
Exactly. Gray propaganda is ostensibly attributed to people or organizations who do not acknowledge the U.S. government as the source of their material and who produce the material as if it were their own. So this is publishing houses, TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, things like that, that are filtered in CIA narratives or CIA propaganda, but they don't necessarily acknowledge it. Then we move to what is the most insidious of all this type of propaganda, which is known as black propaganda, which is unattributed material. It could literally have no factual basis whatsoever.
So like every time there's like a new news story about like, the DPRK, like, having like fucking unicorns or some shit, or like everybody needs to have Kim Jong-un's haircut now, right? And you go for like a source in that like article, and it just says like unnamed sources or sources say, or literally there's no citation of any kind. That's black propaganda.
Right. So it's unattributed to material, or it is attributed to a non-existent source, or it is false material attributed to a real source. The CIA is the only U.S. government agency authorized explicitly to engage in black propaganda operations. So we have an anecdotal testimony from someone who was a CIA agent of the way in which the United States explicitly authorizes the CIA to proliferate utterly fictional material into otherwise reputable news sources. I do want to put that little asterisk on that, that this is anecdotal. The Philip Agee's book, Inside the Company, is an anecdote. It's, so take it with a grain of salt. Who knows? But it is corroborated by a number of other ex-CIA agents who do say that this is absolutely on point with the way that the CIA operates. So I'll just throw that out there. One thing that I did clip out of the book that I felt was very relevant in terms of this kind of like manufactured consent, as it's generally weaponized against third world nations that are maybe going through some kind of like economic nationalism or socialism, is a way that he brought something up specifically from Venezuela. So this is how this information can begin to grow and then be proliferated into the mainstream narrative. So what he says is, for example, the CIA station in Caracas, Venezuela, can cable information, a CIA station in Caracas can cable information on a secret communist plot in Venezuela to the Bogota station, which can surface through a local propaganda agent with attribution to an unidentified Venezuelan government official. The information can then be picked up from the Colombian press and relayed to CIA stations in Ecuador, Lima, La Paz, Santiago, and perhaps even Brazil. A few days later, editorials begin to appear in the newspapers of these places, and pressure mounts on the Venezuelan government to take repressive action against its communists. So you have a CIA station in Venezuela, creates an utterly falseless narrative about, like, whatever, communists devouring babies or something like that. Then this is distributed to various other CIA stations throughout Latin America, who then distribute it into the press. And then as it goes around in that Latin American media realm, then it starts popping up in US media sources. And all they have to do is attribute it to sources in Venezuela, sources in Colombia say this. And that in turn has a pressuring effect on those nations that they need to start, cracking down on, socialist agitation or something like that. So we have like a blueprint here coming directly out of a CIA agent's mouth, how these types of narratives are weaponized and proliferated. Did you want to step in on any of this before I keep going?
Oh yeah, no. I'm gonna literally use probably the best source for any information that you're looking for on any given topic, and that's Wikipedia. And it's a time look here. I'm gonna post it in chat. Fucking from at least the year 2000, right? I want to post this in here, right? Take a look at this, right? And now tell me how many of these, right? Because there's a bunch on here, right? There's like the war in Afghanistan, the war on terror. There's the war on terror in Iraq. There's Operation Iraqi Freedom, right? There's but there's like so many more in here that I didn't even know about, right? How is there? How are there this many? And it's there's different sections. There's 2000 to 2009, 2010 to 2019, and 2020 to present, right? And you got stuff going on in Sierra Leone, you got Nigeria, Yemen, East Timor. I thought that was a thing from the 90s. It's actually what a lot of manufacturing consent is about. You should read it if you haven't. There's Yemen in here in 2002, right? An American MQ-1 Predator fired a Hellfire missile at a car in Yemen, killing Qaid Salim Sinan al-Harati, an al-Qaeda leader thought to be responsible for USS Cole bombing. And then there's a lot about what does Yemen have to do with al-Qaeda, and and then it goes into this whole thing about I don't know if you recall this, if you're old enough in chat to remember, where the war on terror was used as the key to just international going wherever the fuck we want, but openly. Like, I feel like, you know, prior to 9/11, like, we could, you know, we at least had to get, like, you know, confirmation from the government, or we had to create, like, you know, some kind of underground something about it, right? Our United States involvement in regime change.
Listen, for everything that we're discussing right now, including regime change, this is the book that everybody needs to read. Yeah. This is a itemized description. Like, I'll just open up to a random page. Guatemala, 1962 to the 1980s. It doesn't even have chapters. It only just has Iraq. There's things in here that when you see it, it just makes you think, like, I had no idea that this even... Costa Rica, mid-1950s. What even happened there? Like, you know, we know the big ones. We know Mossadegh in Iran. We know our Benz in Guatemala. We know many of those more notable ones. But things, you know, Italy, Albania, all these places. This is U.S. military and CIA intervention since World War II. And William Blum, he actually quotes Parenti in the beginning of this, I feel like this is like almost like an essential resource. Like, it should be on the desk of any leftist that wants to be educated on CIA operations, because you can just, sometimes things come up and I'm like, oh, let me check this real quick so that I can learn more about Uruguay in 1964. The amount of depth in this book is incredible. With that being said, I actually have some quotations from this book a single quotation that I wanted to bring up. And this is kind of going to refer to something that Johnny alluded to earlier in terms of these media outlets that are generally viewed as reputable sources and are generally unquestioned, and at least in the mainstream media discourse. And these are things like Radio Free Asia. Radio Free Asia, which, when Johnny was talking about some of these more outrageous claims about China or DPRK from this media source, for those that don't know, Radio Free Asia is a more contemporary extension of this like Radio Free trend that has existed since the Cold War, which it initially was Radio Free Europe, which covered stories regarding to East Germany, Eastern Bloc countries, and the Soviet Union. First off, just to quote one more time in the CIA Inside the Company book, he states that Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty are the best known gray propaganda operations conducted by the CIA against the Soviet bloc. So that's when these were more in vogue, should I say. You don't hear much about Radio Free Europe anymore because the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore and the Eastern Bloc countries are no longer socialist. But obviously Radio Free Asia has gotten a lot more traction for obvious reasons. But then going into Killing Hope, the book that I just pulled up, he brings up specific situations such as the most pervasive propaganda penetration of the socialist bloc was by means of the airwaves. Numerous transmitters, tremendous wattage, and often round-the-clock programming brought Radio Liberty and Radio Free Russia to the Soviet Union, Radio Free Europe and radio in the American sector to Eastern Europe, and the Voice of America to all parts of the world. With the exception of the last, the stations were ostensibly private organizations financed by gifts from American corporations, nickel and dime donations from the American public, and other private sources. In actuality, the CIA covertly funded almost all of the costs until 1971. Exposure of the agency's role in 1967 led to Congress eventually instituting open governmental financing of the stations. So you almost think that, like, they kind of play like a get you there. You almost think it's like, oh, Congress found out about it, they're going to shut it down. No, they just opened up open government funding of it. I've actually, this book that I'm promoting so
good to see you, Wolf Skeptic,
so enthusiastically, I have a PDF copy right here for the chat for anybody that wants to go through and read that for themselves. If you Control F Radio Free, you can see all the times that he references Radio Free Europe. So this kind of just further illustrates the way that, some of these claims that media is like CIA, this is a CIA driven narrative, this is from the CIA. Maybe sometimes they're erroneous, but this lends quite a bit of credence that there are certainly narratives that are materialized from the CIA and then distributed to larger media sources. And then also something that's worth noting is I'm going to share the screen on this one briefly. The government agency, which is behind the Radio Free Media agencies, is this here, the U.S. Agency for Global Media. The United States Agency for Global Media, formerly blah, 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 is an independent agency of the United States that broadcasts news and information. It describes its mission is vital to U.S. interest, U.S. national interest, and it's to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. It's considered an arm of U.S. diplomacy. It supervises Voice of America, the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, as well as state-funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia, Middle East Broadcasting Networks, and Open Technology Fund. The board of the USAGM has an advisory role. It previously supervised USAGM media networks directly, but was replaced with a single appointed chief executive officer as part of the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2017. So this media agency, which has control and funding influence over all of these different international, like alleged voices of international constituents, is something that, as I just showed in several different documents, has been used as a specific weapon of gray and black propaganda, and specifically used to
Is it constituents or is it shareholders? Is that like
I mean, that's semantics at this point.
Right.
But so yeah, so just kind of going into like further fleshing out this very real and very legitimate claim of media consolidation and media lack of authenticity. I want to go to probably what I think is one of the most startling examples of this, and and it happens in such a subtle way that you don't even realize that you're being influenced by it, and so many people have, especially in the modern discourse. Johnny, before I open up this one, did you have anything you want to add to this? I'm sorry if I'm kind of going off.
No, this is perfect, because like what you're talking about, at one point, like he starts Michael Parenti starts talking about like the representation of like people of color in media, and at the time, you got to remember, this is like way before Barack Obama, right? And we'll skip over that topic for now. We'll get to it at a later date, right?
Sure.
But he talks about like the presidential campaign for Jesse Jackson in 1984, right? Which like apparently, I'll just get straight to the quote. Although his financial status was much more modest than that of other presidential candidates and all television anchor persons, the press raised questions about his quote large salary. And because he argued that U.S. interventions abroad served neither the interests of the people of those regions nor those of the American people, he was labeled a third world radical, right? Now, tell me that doesn't sound familiar even today, right? Especially in this very, very muddied waters, right, of contemporary media when it comes to anybody that tries to talk about any kind of anti-war movement that has been thoroughly broken since the War on Terror, right? You have LaRouchites and Pat Socks, going to like, if you really want to know more about like LaRouchites and Pat Socks, hopefully one day we can bring on like Famous Horse, to talk about that. I know that he was in chat like a moment ago, but and I don't know if like he's talking about that tonight, but whatever. My point is that like they're going to like what's her name, AOC and what's the other like squad representative? They're like heckling them about like they're like heckling them about like the war in Ukraine and everything, and so they're like heckling them about like the war in Ukraine or something, and it's like Tulsi Gabbard is like pro-U.S. military, like she is not the Ilhan Omar. Thank you, Siram. I'm just gonna Sikram. I don't know. We're probably both mispronouncing the shit out of that, but my point is that like it's hard to even just get like an anti-war message out there, or to have like an anti-war candidate or anything like of that nature that's like clear and concise, right? Second try was right on the most recent. We're trying.
So kind of delving back into like, the actual evidence of this whole operation of invented reality and fictionalized media narratives. I want to highlight the workings of an extremely innocuously named department called the Information Research Department. This is a department that was created by, I guess you could call it like the British alternative to the CIA, but also frequently in conjunction with the CIA. I'm going to bring this link up and put it, share it with the stream, with the stream, so that we can all look at it together here. And this is all just coming from Wikipedia. I intentionally used sources like this to kind of illustrate that this isn't some like radically niche or conspiratorial information. This is a reflection of public information as much as anything else. So just to bring this up now, okay, here we go. And this is something that the more I read it, the more astounded I was just to read so many of these things. Here we go. All right. So this is the Information Research Department. Just to read a little bit of this.
Look who it is. It's the guy. It's the Animal Farm guy. It's the
way that I can zoom in on this a little bit, Lily. Should I just do it on my own tab? Is that the best way to do it?
Yes, I think if you zoom in the tab, it should.
Thank you for your patience, chatters.
There we go.
There we
Sorry,
go.
yeah, we are just kind of getting on this a little bit. Figuring out the ones and twos of it on the fly here.
Your loyalty will be remembered.
This is just the basic Wikipedia article on this. I'm not inserting any of my own. This is like everyone already kind of knows where this is going, which is great. I'm not inserting any of my own, spin on this or anything like that. I'm just reading what the Wikipedia page has to say about it. So the Information Research Department, IRD, was a secret Cold War propaganda department of the British Foreign Office. That's what I was saying was kind of like the equivalent to like the CIA in British during the Cold War time. Created to publish anti-communist propaganda, including black propaganda, which we covered earlier in the discussion if you were here over the talk of the CIA black propaganda missions, to provide support and information to anti-communist politicians, academics, and writers, and to use weaponized information, but also disinformation and fake news to attack not only its original targets, but also certain socialist and anti-colonial movements. Exactly, yes. Just to move forward with that. Okay. Soon after its creation, the IRD broke away from focusing solely on Soviet matters and began to publish pro-colonial propaganda intended to suppress pro-independence revolutions in Asia, Africa, and Ireland, and the Middle East. The IRD was heavily involved in the publishing of books, newspapers, leaflets, journals, and even created publishing houses to act as propaganda fronts. So I think that that's just so relevant that to this discussion, is that entire publishing houses that distribute a number of books with severely slanted political views were created by the CIA / the British the IRD, specifically to disseminate and influence black media, black propaganda, gray propaganda, and outright fake news to subvert not only communism, but also to subvert pro-colonial movements across the third world. This continues even deeper as what this agency does. It's insane how much this agency has affected so many different things. You can see, where is it now? Okay, so we can see old Orwell right over here, which is interesting because the IRD was a government department to which George Orwell, if you ever heard of Orwell's list, IRD was the government department to which Orwell submitted his list of suspected communists, including many prominent people such as Charlie Chaplin, Paul Robeson, my guy,
Paul Robeson, New Jersey, gang, motherfucker,
and Michael Redgrave. With the help of Orwell's widow, the IRD gained the foreign rights to much of Orwell's work and spent years distributing Animal Farm onto every continent, translating Orwell's work into 20 different languages, funding the creation of an animated feature film based on Animal Farm, and working with the CIA to create a feature full-length Animal Farm animated movie, the first of its kind in British history. Many historians have noted how Orwell's literary reputation can largely be credited to joint propaganda operations between the IRD and the CIA. This Wikipedia page and I'm sorry, I'm not constructing this opinion off of anything else. Many historians that his literary reputation can be largely credited to joint propaganda operations between IRD and CIA. They heavily marketed Animal Farm for audiences in the Middle East in an attempt to sway Arab nationalism and independence activists from seeking Soviet aid, and was believed to IRD agents that a story featuring pigs as the villains would appeal highly towards Muslim audiences. IRD funded the activities of many authors, including Bertrand Russell and Robert Conquest. More on Robert Conquest in a moment. The IRD agents took part in many historic events, including the European Economic Community, Korean War, Suez Crisis, the Malayan Emergency, the Troubles, the Mau Mau Uprising, the Cyprus Emergency, and the Sino-Indian War, blah, blah, blah. Just to go a little bit deeper into this.
It's just a smattering. It's just a smattering of, fuckery. But I'm sorry, now the CIA, the IRD.
Yeah, it's kind of can be used interchangeably there. Let's see here.
So, to quote, another piece of, inventing reality, by focusing on human interest, quote unquote, trivia on contests rather than content, the press make it difficult for the public to give intelligent expression to political life and to mobilize around issues. Thus, the media have intentionally or not a conservative effect on public discourse. Given short shrift are the concerns of millions of people regarding nuclear arms, like what's going on right now. We've never been closer to nuclear midnight, right? If I'm not mistaken. Pentagon spending, which, the Pentagon had like a whole ass IRS, investigation that lasted 4 years and was basically given up on after those 4 years. Tax reform. Do I even need to talk about how fucked things are, economically and financially here in America right now? We've had 2 years, right, of, a liberal president, a liberal Democratic president that, said he was going to, reform taxes and repeal all of the billionaire tax cuts, for the rich that the previous administration, or should I call it regime, imposed. The war in Central America, as if we haven't seen the history, right, of U.S. hegemony treating the Central America and South America as their backyard, like we talked about on our previous episode. Coming home to roost in the Summit of the Americas, where hardly a single member that was invited even showed up, right? And then the latest vote to, stop the embargo and stop the sanctioning of Cuba was voted on almost nearly unanimously across the globe, except for 3 countries, the U.S., chiefly being among them, right? Unemployment and poverty, which we have seen zero alleviation of, since the writing of this book, and let alone in our lives. The democratic input, the great public debate about the State of the Union and its national policies, the heightening of political consciousness, and the information levels, all the things democratic electoral campaigns are supposed to foster, are crowded off the stage by image politics. Now, especially concerning the fact that the midterms were yesterday, and the results, are still being discussed probably by like a lot of channels today, right? U.S., Israel, Brazil, and Ukraine voted to keep the embargo.
Thank you, Skeptic. Shout out to Skeptic in the chat.
Thank you, Skeptic. Especially considering that the midterms were yesterday, right? Like, it's largely we are down to, right, debating over which war hawk, right, or which person from which party that will either make things worse for those most marginalized, right, versus the people that will make a pinky promise, right, make a campaign promise to protect the safety of those most marginalized, right, of those people seeking abortions or access to abortions. It's really all that was promised by Roe, or that trans lives will be endangered, right, by the election of this crazed, unhinged, untethered movement within the one half of the 2 parties that we have to elect, right? So it's a lot. So I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Just a little bit more, in depth here on this information research department. I did want to bring up that they did create Encounter magazine, which I'm just hearing about, which is a joint operation with the CIA. Another time that they colluded with the CIA, as I mentioned earlier, with all the Orwell distribution. It was published in the United Kingdom, and it was largely Anglo-American intellectual and cultural journal, originally associated with the anti-Stalinist left, intended to counter the idea of Cold War neutralism. So it's a CIA-funded and created and disseminated magazine meant to kind of masquerade as like a left-wing media source, or like a reasonable left media source. The magazine was rarely critical of American foreign policy, but beyond this, editors had considerable publishing freedom. It was edited by Stephen Pham. He resigned afterwards, he resigned after it emerged that the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which published the magazine, was being covertly funded by the CIA. So the entire funding process of it was the CIA. This is perhaps, you can find like a lot of examples of, like I said, foreign conflicts that this organization was involved with. But I find this one the most disgusting, frankly. If anyone is aware of what happened in 1965 in Indonesia, it's probably one of the lesser discussed mass killings, mass tragedies of the 20th century. But just
hey, Pat,
what's that?
You want to know some interesting trivia about Indonesia?
Sure.
Guess where the largest Muslim population in the world is?
It's in Indonesia, yeah.
It's in Indonesia, right?
Following the abortive Indonesian communist coup attempt of 1965 and the subsequent mass killings, I believe between 500,000 to 1 million people died in this anti-communist cleansing. Or maybe a purge, if you want to call it that. If you want to read about this, there's a book called The Jakarta Method by Vincent Blevins. It's a very, very, very good book. It details very deeply this incident that happened in Indonesia. But the IRD was instrumental in disseminating propaganda, which supported and bolstered the anti-communist forces that would go on to commit what could be described as a genocide. The anti-PKI propaganda, which is the Communist Party, through several radio stations. And I don't know if you remember this, we covered these just recently under the conglomeration of funded media outlets by the US government. Our old friends Radio Australia and Voice of America, which are funded by that same media, that US media conglomerate.
NED, CIA.
Yes, exactly. So they had a instrumental influence over one of the largest mass killings of the 20th century. And outside of that, the last thing that I wanted to go over here regarding this operation is through an individual named Robert Conquest. For those that don't know who Robert Conquest is one of the foremost authors. Here he is right here. In Soviet history, I should say, historically Soviet history.
Hot take incoming.
Just off of his Wikipedia page, he's a longtime research fellow, most notable for his work on the Soviet Union. His books include The Great Terror, Stalin's Purges of the 1930s, Harvest of Sorrow, and Stalin, the Breaker of Nations. Just to kind of tackle this specific individual here, we can go on. Yeah, Robert, what a fitting last name. So I'm going to change this so that I can cycle through these a little bit more seamlessly. Okay. So if you look into the Great Purges, you can see that the Wikipedia page for the Great Purges, you can see Robert Conquest is quoted a number of times. Throughout this as evidence. He's pretty much cited in every single section, repeatedly cited throughout this. If you go to the Holodomor, you can see that he's cited numerous times throughout this as well. His works up until like the opening of Soviet archives was extremely, I would say, some of the leading research on the topics of the horrors of the Soviet Union. Just based on this, where did it go? Oh, okay. I just got to go back here. Just based on what is shared on the Information Research Department, which we've already kind of gone through as a black propaganda, fake news network disseminating anti-communist propaganda, we can also see here that it is listed that, find it. Here it is. Some writers who worked for the IRD have since been found to have used IRD material and presented it to the academic community as though it were their own work. Robert Conquest's book, The Great Terror, Stalin's Purges of the 30s, drew heavily from IRD files. And multiple volumes of Soviet history, which Conquest edited, also contained IRD material presented as though it were his own independent research. So I just kind of wanted to like illuminate that, just to kind of like bring like a greater awareness that like maybe some of these narratives that became like extremely dominant and almost just like adopted into a cultural zeitgeist of common sense about these narratives, turns out were actually largely, or at least in some significant point that it's being detailed on that website, on that Wikipedia page, were influenced by a explicitly fraudulent, fictitious, CIA-funded media outlet.
So, to borrow a couple words from Parenti in the section, do the media manage our minds, right? There's a part where he talks about, quote, if through selective exposure, we utilize the media mainly to reinforce our established predispositions on such historical issues as like what Pat was talking about, right? Where do these predispositions themselves come from? In part, they come from the media. Furthermore, even the various other socializing agencies, such as family and school, are not immune to the climate of opinion created by the media. Thus, at least some of our internalized political predilections derive from the dominant political culture that the press has a hand in shaping, and from earlier direct media exposure. Right now, think about like how much this has come up. Right, think about all the various ways that you've been inundated with the crimes of Stalin, or the human rights abuses of the Soviet Union or China, and never Lao. Why is it never Lao? That's all I really want to know. For years now, since I've become a communist, and I actually found out that Lao is, and yes, the S is silent, is a socialist nation. How come they're always left out of everything? How come they're not even like demonized? You know what I mean? But whatever. He goes on to say that because of previous media exposure, we are likely to resist opinions that depart too far from the conventional mainstream view. In such situations, our self-directed selectivity is designed to avoid information that contradicts the dominant viewpoint. If much of our information and opinion intake is filtered through our previously established mental predispositions, these predispositions are often not part of the conscious discernment, but of our unexamined conditioning. Thus, rather than being rational guardians against propaganda, our mindsets have been shaped by prolonged exposure to that very same propaganda, and may be active accomplices. So, think about it, especially like, for the internet is a relatively recent thing, right? And misinformation prior to the internet, I'm sure, like that Tom Segura bit, is like very easy to do. You just need to tell 10 friends, and those friends wind up telling 10 friends, and it's just like, no, that's because everybody says it. I got into an argument one time with a friend about the DPRK, right? And I said, like, how much have you actually read into like where these articles that you read, where they get their sources from, or what are their sources? Like, like who does it benefit? And he's like, I don't care about any of that. That's what everybody says.
Right. I agree. And, and I don't want to like, I know that we're treading on some like kind of controversial, topics here, and I'm not making like any kind of like, wholesale judgments on any specific historical event. I'm just kind of like illuminating that at least in this one individual who I feel like is extremely important on those several topics regarding the Soviet Union, can be largely discredited and was intentionally disseminated through a propaganda agency that is accurately known to distribute absolutely fraudulent information for political ends. I'm not making any kind of like a judge. I'm not Grover Furr up here and slamming the desk and saying that I've never single crime of anyone. You know what I mean? I'm just.
Does he actually slam the table when he?
In my mind, he slams the table, I guess. But I'm just saying that, like, while we're on this topic, that is largely like conspiratorial and often discredited, and maybe a lot of times people will say like, you know, oh, communists, they think everything's CIA propaganda. I just wanted to bring to the table several instances of very, very real, documented, not like fringe conspiracy theory examples of that exact thing happening, and that exact thing ending up kind of like making it into the general public opinion of historical matters.
Are you pulling up a link?
No.
Okay, so
I've already pulled it all up. I'm saying that I'm speaking retroactively, that I've pulled those things up
right.
to illustrate that this is something that has happened. In the last episode, I talked about the Voice of Liberation, which was the CIA, the fake CIA radio station in Guatemala during Arbenz, where they were allegedly coming out of the jungles to support the guerrillas of Castillo Armas, when in reality none of that was actually happening. It was all coming from CIA headquarters, complete psyop on the Guatemalan population to turn them against Arbenz. So you can just add that to the list of all these other organizations and instances that I just kind of went over there.
And we can even just look at the Wikipedia entry for list of CIA controversies, right? A lot of these are like fairly recent.
That we're using something like Wikipedia, because you know, it's not like we are like digging into the tomes of some very you know, esoteric communist, conspiracy charges. We're looking at the most surface level. I'm sure that if I wanted to, and if I wanted to actually get some books about this, I could find more damning information about the IRD and about, I only had a few days to prepare for this. I'm sure that if I really wanted to research this topic, the list of CIA front media organizations, I probably could have done several podcasts about this. This is just something that I pulled up in addition to working full-time and being in school full-time to illustrate some of my points here. And I just used the most surface level information that's available to everyone on Wikipedia. And it should be not controversial whatsoever to talk about these things that are just readily found on Wikipedia. So if that was controversial topics, then, so be it. But I'm not going through any kind of, strange sources to corroborate this. I'm just going off of the surface level information.
All I can think of right now is like that what was it, like Reddit or something, or Twitter, where like, somebody made a meme about like how people imagine CIA agents to be like Jack Reacher, like fighting against like, this pedophile drug lord or something. And like, the person that used to be a CIA agent allegedly or whatever responding to it is more like, it's more like we're supplying them the children.
So where did you want to take it from here? Because that really concludes what I had prepared in terms of the charges of conspiracy, that this doesn't really happen, that like you can't just point at things and be like, this is CIA propaganda. And also, I think that was also a very salient example of media and its unholy matrimony with the State Department narrative. I do have more information here about kind of how this relates specifically to the internet, which I know that you just brought up, which I think that if we're going to talk about a book that was written in 1986 about the media, that is very important that we add like an addendum regarding the internet. I have something to add if you want to talk about that. Can I request a bathroom break before we get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to the bathroom, man.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is that faux pas? I'm sorry. I wish I.
No, we don't have like a what the hell is it, like a subscriber like train thing going.
Restrooms are perfectly well allowed. I had
I drink a lot of liquids. I'm sorry.
All right, y'all. We'll be right back.
everybody. As a chatter, I give you permission to. What am I if not adherent or obedient to those in chat? So thank you, Frankster says, and also Amazing Wolf Skeptic for putting me in my place. So do you want to go into this internet stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. I guess just before we do, there's a section called Beyond Orwell's 1984. And Parenti says, if Big Brother comes to America, he will not be a fearsome, foreboding figure with a heart-chilling, omnipresent glare as in 1984. He will come with a smile on his face, a quip on his lips, a wave to the crowd, and a press that A, dutifully reports the suppressive measures he is taking to save the nation from internal chaos and foreign threat, and B, gingerly questions whether he will be able to succeed. Which, like, you know, I'm no, like, you know, more any lesser, more like, you know, reasonable person that, like, you know, thinks like Trump is horrendous. I think if anything, he's the most like accurate face of American hegemony that you know, we've ever had, right? And by accurate, I mean like they're not hiding it. You know what I mean? Like, and he's just like pretty much just acts exactly like that. Like all of his speeches, you know, that are like 2 hours long are always like, you know, but I don't know if I'll be able to do it, you know, without your help. And like, you know, the only thing he doesn't have is like, you know, except for what even Fox News, I think, gave up on him like near the end, dutifully reports the suppressive measures he is taking to save the nation from internal chaos and foreign threat. But then again, when aren't we under foreign threat? Isn't that the whole point of the military? If you even question, like, you know, well, why do we keep like recruiting kids in high schools? It's like, well, who's gonna defend the nation from who? Do people like honestly, legitimately think that like every other country in the world is just like trying to overthrow America? I think they're just trying to get us out. Like, if that's what you mean by overthrow, then like that makes like way more sense to me. Like, yeah, get the fuck out of here.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Go on. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I appreciate that insertion. So I just laughed again against that Georgia O'Keeffe Animal Crossing 1985 comment again. I just like looked left and read it. So okay, kind of like as I said before, obviously a book written in 1986 about the media and how the media influences people has a pretty glaring hole in it in terms of its relevancy to contemporary media landscape, and that is the internet didn't fucking exist. So I think it's important to cover a little bit of these themes that are relevant to the internet. For that purpose, I have drawn extensively. I don't know. I don't want to maybe not extensively. I've drawn my limited understanding of this topic from an author named Robert McChesney, and I'll link the book in the chat again. I don't have a PDF for this one, but I do have something from the archive website where if you sign up, you can rent the book kind of like a library for an hour at a time. If anyone is familiar with it, it's really easy to use. You just have to sign up. It's free. This book is called The Digital Disconnect, and it is Digital Disconnect: How Capitalism is Turning the Internet Against Democracy. And he actually has some really interesting like things that I just didn't really know because I was so young when the internet first came out, about kind of like what the aims and the ideas of the internet first were. Prior to, you know, this internet monopoly, toxic internet environment that we know today, the internet was looked at as the saving grace of one-sided media narratives. It was viewed as the thing that was going to once and for all equalize society in terms of that was going to equalize.
Thank you, little proletariat.
Little proletariat, yeah. That was going to equalize information for the layman's individual all the way up to, you know, the wealthiest individual. I do have a quote here from McChesney that states, where is it? It is supremely ironic that the internet, the much ballyhooed champion of increased consumer power and cutthroat competition, has become one of the greatest generators of monopoly in economic history. So this thing that was meant initially to be the tool of the masses to be able to educate themselves outside of these like mass media enterprises that had already dominated newspapers and publishing and the TV screens and radio. But it turns out through all commodities within a capitalist economic structure, this just became another tool for major conglomerates to monopolize. A interesting fact regarding internet companies as it relates to today is that in most internet areas, this book was written in 2012, by the way, so I'm just going to put that in there as an asterisk because things may have changed since the time that this was written. The internet is democracy when it's free from rulers. Correct. Yeah, I would agree with that. But unfortunately, we have an extremely monopolized internet landscape. And just to go into some specifics on that, in most internet areas where profits can be generated, private interests have been able to convert beachheads into monopoly fortresses and generate endless profit. Google, for example, holds nearly 70% of the search engine market. It may soon challenge the market share of that of John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil had at its peak. So just to insert something there. What we're looking at now is a internet landscape where several companies have more of a market share of these internet areas than Rockefeller did in the oil industry, which, if you know, this is what prompted the Antitrust Act. These monopolies became so gross and so untetherable, uncontrollable, that the United States introduced the antitrust laws. Sure. But at this point, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We have internet providers and media companies that have a greater market share of that specific market than even Rockefeller did in the robber baron era. So this is, let's see, I think I have some more stats here. Google already has 97% of the booming mobile search market. Despite attacks by Apple and the growth of open source Linux, Microsoft Windows operating system continues to be used on more than 90% of all computers. Apple, via iTunes, controls an estimated 87% market share in digital music downloads and 70% of the media player market. The iPad continues the burgeoning tablet computer market. 90% of the profits in the smartphone space are going to Apple and Samsung. A former Microsoft executive said in 2012 that there's no real signs that's changing anytime soon. Amazon sells between 70 and 80% of both physical and ebooks online. This was written in 2012. I would imagine that this is like probably broken so far outside of just books. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how, I'm not a big like, in 2012, I was kind of outside of it. I was kind of off the grid. I don't know how big Amazon was at that time as it is now, but I would imagine if they're talking about just books, Amazon has to dominate such a significant market of just like all internet transactions at this point.
Were they still just like a bookseller?
What's that?
In 2017, the biggest growth year for companies' properties alone, and added more than a square feet of building the company had total in 2012 when it was already the largest online. 2012 it was already the largest online retailer. So yeah.
See, so he was Robert McChesney was only referencing book sales, but like I said, I think that really understates the level of market dominance that Amazon truly has.
Well, there was a point in time where Amazon was mainly known as just like a book reseller. Like you could get like college or like, you know, whatever like textbooks you needed or something for cheap on there. That's what it used to be before you could get like, I don't know, can you get a gun on Amazon? Are we there yet?
Can I get a 3D printed gun on Amazon with my Bitcoin? So just to go a little bit further into this, a recent analysis of economic inequality in the United States concluded that the stupendous gains made possible by the technological advances of the information age have been almost entirely captured by a tiny elite. And authors of a 2011 report by the New America Foundation stated that the internet will devolve into a feudalized space, one that limits democratic freedoms while enriching an oligopoly of powerful gatekeepers. It is a world that would have been considered impossible not too long ago, but it is the destination where one inevitability arrives when really existing capitalism is behind the wheel. Just to go into that, this feudalized space, if anyone is familiar with Yanis Varoufakis's concept of techno-feudalism, where he states that we have private owners of the markets that we engage in. So right now, we are forced to engage in a privately owned market. So if you start a business, you almost have no choice but to use Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, Google, all of these things. So like the very nature of commodity trading is now channeled through privately owned mediums. And that's what kind of Yanis, he can explain it much more eloquently and much more, economically educated than I can. But he's someone that I actually have quite a bit of respect for in terms of like, modern day economists. So if you want to definitely look up his speeches regarding techno-feudalism. And it's interesting that I had already read a little bit about that. And now I'm kind of doing some back research here on Robert McChesney. Robert McChesney here, who essentially makes very similar predictions as Yanis Varoufakis in this case.
Yeah, I guess that that's like the one to respond to Skeptic Wolf's comment. I guess that's like the one area where Walmart kind of beats them. I think Walmart still sells guns, right?
I don't know. I live in Philadelphia, so I don't think they sell guns in the Walmarts here.
To answer your question, I got myself put on a list for you. You're welcome. They don't sell real guns, but they sell very realistic looking BB guns, and it's kind of terrifying.
That is terrifying. Holy shit. Get that shit like airdrop from like a drone.
But yes, as a Georgia resident, there are places you can just walk in and purchase a gun and leave, and you don't need any kind of license or registration or anything like that. You can just go get it.
Lily, Georgia is the first place I ever visited where I went into Walmart and someone had a gun in a holster on their hip.
Yep.
They're open carrying.
We're up in New Jersey and I live in Philadelphia now. That does not fly. And I remember just driving through Georgia and going into a Walmart and a guy just walking next to me with a fully brandished firearm next to me, and I was like a little bit tripped out on that. Like you kind of look around and you're like, is everybody seeing this? Is this
yes,
allowed?
I have regular intrusive thoughts while I'm driving of like, don't piss that person off because they definitely just have a gun in their passenger seat.
Yeah, we can't have that in New Jersey. Like, we just don't have the culture for that. I feel like if we instituted like, no, I shouldn't go down this line of thing. I mean, like, look, I'm a firearms owner, right? I'm definitely like, not pro 2A, but I am pro under no pretext. Should the proletariat, should the working under no pretext, should the working class, have their arms removed. Their means of defense.
I would be a firearm owner if I was not a convicted felon.
Right. So, I just don't think like we have like a culture, right? Like a long-standing culture surrounding firearms here in New Jersey that like would facilitate responsible ownership, because we can't even like responsibly fucking drive. We can't even drive right here.
They don't trust us to pump our own gas.
Right. They don't trust us to pump our own gas. Like maybe it's not such a bad idea that we don't have open carry or concealed carry in New Jersey. At least, I don't know. But like, that's the other thing is that like, all right, so like, do we not have that like across the board? No, we still have people that like, a lot of the times, right, are either like the most unhinged, right, or in the service of facilitating the hegemony of the state, which is police, right? They're not here to serve and protect you. They're here to serve and protect property and those that own property, because you don't make laws. Maybe every 2 years, you get something on a ballot where it's just like, yes or no. Do you want this fucking thing or that? And that's it, man. You don't make the laws, right? Otherwise, like, maybe growing up, I would have been able to park in front of my own fucking house, right, without getting a fucking ticket. Well, where do I get the fucking vote on that, right? Or do I have to go down to town hall and argue for years at a time to stop ticketing me for parking overnight in front of the house I live in? But
I'm sorry, I'm laughing so hard at that comment from the little proletariat. They said, "Insert Zoolander gas party scene." It's not being trusted. Have you ever had your friends die in a freak gasoline fight accident? That was so
what
good.
song is playing during that scene? It's like
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Fuck. Yeah.
Maybe the little proletariat knows. But I haven't watched Zoolander in quite a long time, but that's a great one. One other thing before we get too off topic here, just in regards into the media landscape of the internet and how that translates back into unscrupulous means by the State Department to be able to conduct their clandestine activities. Here's a little article from 2021. 2021, about kind of the things that are going on. Let's just cap this back onto what I was saying before about how the internet has generated more significant monopolies than during the robber baron era in these spaces of internet commodity trading. And this is also happening on the back end of that. Big tech complied with 85% of government requests handed over data in the first half of 2020. So what we have here, companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft received over 112,000 data requests from local, state, and federal officials, with Facebook accounting for the largest number of disclosures. So not only
you're telling me at a time where like everyone is on the internet, everyone was on the internet during 2020, right? Everyone is like, I believe that was also the same year that like, the BLM protests were happening, right? And everyone is posting everything on social media, right? Big tech is just handing over 85% of what the government is requesting, but we are all on a fucking list right now.
I wonder what that 15% was. That was like too much for Facebook to like be like.
That's a good question. I guess like would that be like I guess like the children of like state representatives or like people that are connected or something, or like those are actually like the feds that were infiltrating like BLM protests and like taking hammers to windows and shit.
Yeah.
Is that the 15%?
Data compiled by the 4 biggest tech companies shows that law enforcement requests for user information, phone calls, emails, text, photos, shopping histories, driving routes, and more have more than tripled in the U.S. since 2015. Police are also increasingly savvy about covering their tracks so as not to alert suspects of their interests. So that's concerning. Just another way that we can kind of tie this whole into not only being a way, like, now it's like a two-way street, whereas before, print media, radio, television was kind of like a one-way, like propaganda plug into your forehead that you could kind of sit on your couch and just consume State Department narratives. Now they actually get a reciprocal effect from you, where not only can they inject these narratives directly into you 18 hours a day, every waking moment that you have in your life where you're staring at a screen, but also they can then harvest what you're doing to have a more educated dossier on any individual and the most intimate portions of their life, including photos and emails and texts and phone calls.
I don't know if this is accurate at all because I'm pulling it up directly from like one of those like Google answer tabs or whatever, but it's like, what percent of people are police officers, right? And police officer years, 20 to 30 years, percentages, 17%. 16.8% of all police officers are women, while 83.2% are men. But that's like, there are, what is this, like 324,882? That can't be accurate. That can't be 17% of the U.S.
70% of the United States a police officer?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out like what percent of the U.S. are police officers, and maybe that's why that's that 15% that wasn't handed over from big tech requests.
I don't know, man. I'm not even going to speculate on it. You know what I mean?
That's so crazy. But I think that like what you're getting at, like, kind of relates a little bit more to the second chapter of like Inventing Reality, where he starts talking about how the the media is in few hands at the end of the day. You know,
yeah. Well, really, again, this just reflects the general trajectory of any market under its free real estate. Little Proletariat has been actually absolutely slaying me in the comment section, and is a well-needed comedic relief to the extremely dark and concerning subject matter that we are covering over CIA distributed black propaganda that's used to kill hundreds of thousands of Indonesians, as well as the absolute dystopian nightmare that we all exist in, where our very lives are supervised, monitored, sold, and otherwise disrespected by the United States State Department. Luckily, we have individuals like the Little Proletariat to remind us of Tim and Eric and Zoolander references that make this whole nightmare bearable.
Thank you again so much.
We thank our chat for that.
We thank our chat. We thank our few but loyal, right? And you will be remembered. Years from now when we finally finish inventing reality. So I guess I'll just quote this little part. Let me know in chat, if you want me to just stop quoting Parenti. Just stop quoting this fucking goddamn book. Through mergers, packaged news services, union busting, wage freezes, and staff cutting, the large media conglomerates have attained a rate of return on their investments that is double the industrial average. Consider the Hearst Corporation. That's right, William Randolph Hearst. That guy that paid Benito Mussolini to write articles for his newspaper, at a time where he was making, what was it, 4 times less as the head of Italy than he was getting paid to write articles for William Randolph Hearst. William Randolph Hearst, who also hired somebody that had been arrested for human trafficking and then sent him to this faraway country called the Soviet Union, where allegedly, this thing was going on. But we'll get to that later. Whose empire includes scores of newspapers, magazines, television, and radio stations. Syndication productions, including King Features and Cowl Syndicate. Who the fuck are they? And interest in cable stations and cable networks, real estate, printing, cattle ranching, and
free
other businesses. What?
It's free real estate. Free
real estate. In 1987, Hearst showed debt-free assets of $3.4 billion of the $215 million in profits made that year. $40 million were distributed to a relatively small group of William Randolph Hearst living descendants, and the rest went for capital spending and acquisitions, right? And not much has changed since then. Maybe the names have changed, but the goals haven't, right? Largely, the opinions have not, right? And you look at literally almost any major, news media in America, right, or even out in Europe, right? The opinions haven't changed. Socialism bad, right? China must be stopped now that the shoe is starting to be put on the other foot, right? Unions are bad, right? Businessmen are good. I'm trying to think what else? Am I missing anything?
I don't know. I don't know if you want to cover a kind of humorous topic that I have queued up here.
All right, let's go for it.
Since we're kind of getting into the meme phase here, I got something that is relevant, concerning, but also kind of funny.
All right, no, I definitely want to hear it. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, let me see. Hold on. All right, so I'm a little bit curious about what the motivation is of the U.S. State Department in its choices of propaganda, especially as it concerns Latin America and the fixation on condoms.
What?
You've never witnessed any of these condom stories that are coming out of Latin America?
Is this the Cuban condom pizza from the 80s or whatever?
That's part of it. I don't think that's from the 80s. I don't think that's from the 80s. I don't think that's from the 80s at all. That's from Twitter.
No, that's definitely from the 80s, dude.
All right. Well,
they can't make cheese. They don't have enough
I
dairy to make.
I think that was only during the special period that even became.
Yeah. All right. So like the 90s. Sorry.
Yeah, but I think that might be a little bit more. I have the article right here. It's from a Reuters article, but so this one actually relates specifically to Venezuela. So check this out. Right? Venezuela. Let's share my screen. Window. This one. Share. Okay. So this is a 2015 article from Business Insider. A 36-pack of condoms in Venezuela now costs as much as an iPhone in the United States.
What? Is that like a unit of measurement for them? Like,
yeah, the iPhone. 36 condoms cost as much as 2 iPhones. Yeah, I get 4 ramrods to the hogshead.
A Big Mac is worth like a package of 5 condoms.
Okay, so the country is broke. Its economy is on track to shrink 7% in 2050 alone, in large part because oil prices are so low. And now, thanks to rampant inflation, well, let's get to the condom stuff. A lack of contraception doesn't keep people from having sex. It just keeps them from having safe sex. Bloomberg reports that the country started running out of condoms and other kinds of contraceptives in December. The condom shortage, caused by scarcity of dollars among importers, has prices on a website used to find scarce goods soaring and risk aggravating one of South America's highest HIV infection and teenage pregnancy rates. A 36-pack of Trojan condoms is going for 4,760 bolivars, which is about $750.
God damn.
A site where Venezuelan critics bid for scarce goods. A 3-pack is 399 bolivars, about $62. So, when did this come out? February 4th, 2015, right?
Okay.
What about this?
No. They what?
Who
was writing this shit?
On. We have Schrodinger's condom shortage, or condom where they are simultaneously worth as much as an iPhone, but also somehow the Venezuelan health ministry the very same year was able to distribute millions of condoms. The Venezuelan health ministry announced on Friday that the National Public Health System will distribute 18 million condoms for men and women free of charge over the course of 2015. And let's see here. There's a part in here where it even says, the scarcity of condoms particularly has been widely reported in the private international media, with high-profile Bloomberg earlier this month suggesting that the price of a 32-pack of Trojans now exceeds $755. Despite the report's claims, a pack of 3 Turks condoms in Venezuela currently fetch a retail price of between 100 and 300 bolivars. That's $8 to $26. A price which, although expensive, is not beyond the purchasing capacity of ordinary Venezuelans. Nonetheless, condom shortages pose a serious problem, especially in the context of teen pregnancy and HIV. In the face of these challenges, the Bolivarian government has sought to break new ground over the past year by expanding its commitment to public sexual health. Last year, the Ministry of Health distributed over 17 million condoms for men and over 2 million for women. So these are 2 dueling news articles within the same year. Now, I don't know how popular VenezuelaAnalysis.com is in Venezuela. Yeah, did I say that? I'm sorry. Venezuelan analysis. It even takes the A, Venezuela analysis. It's like they combine the 2 words.
Venezuelan analysis. So
Venezuela analysis. I don't know how popular this is amongst your average media consumer in the United States, but I'm pretty
certain I follow them on Twitter too, which is weird.
Business Insider is pretty significant. So this is where you're going to hear those, very bombastic claims that it costs more than an iPhone to get a condom in Venezuela, when in reality it doesn't even cost that much. And also, the Venezuelan government is distributing millions of condoms free of charge. So this is just like, obviously you could write volumes about Venezuela. You can look at Dr. Alan McLeod, his work on the topic. But this is just to kind of highlight one very specific and kind of humorous duality between media sources at the same exact time, where one could not be further from the truth and is likely the one that is so much more largely disseminated and consumed by your average American.
So this is like that fucking Star Trek bit where it's just like, there's two men in front of a door. One of them always lies or tells nothing but lies. The only one tells the truth, right? Like fucking what? Fucking so I don't know. Maybe I'll hold off on the Parenti quote till after. All right, tell me about condoms in Cuba, Pat.
I don't have I actually don't have like a deep one on this. I just wanted to pull this up just because it's like, what is with like these like weird like propaganda things in condoms? Like what is like the it's supposed to be like a pizza one here and something like that.
I guess with how many times the CIA has been busted in like what?
Maybe I pulled up the wrong thing. I don't see anything on here about cheese or
cheese. Oh no. We'll wind up with Q heads in here. What the fuck is it like? It just maybe with how many times the CIA has been busted in like a Brazilian brothel or something, like that's why like they're just condom focused, or something. I don't know, but should I bring up a relevant part of inventing reality to this whole thing?
By all means.
Seldom holding itself accountable for what it says, it can blithely produce information and opinions that conflict with previously held ones. Without a word of explanation for the shift, we can also learn to question what the press tells us by noting the absence of supporting evidence, the failure to amplify and explain. We can ask, why are the assertions that appear again and again in the news not measured against observable actualities? We can thereby become more aware of how the news media are inviting us to believe something without establishing any reason for the belief. And it's like, there's so many different things. Like we could bring up like the classic example of, what was her name? The Iraqi, or I think it was like a Kuwaiti, representative's daughter for the Iraq War.
I'll pull it up for chat. Let's see. Here it is. Okay. Let's open this up.
So I believe it was for the first Gulf invasion, right? I think that was under Bush Senior. I think this one was.
So let us go to a little screen sharing action here.
I think her name is
Nayara. Nayara. I don't know.
Oh, we're just butchering the
shit.
This
is the very testimony that was given to the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus one day before I was born, on October 90, about accusations of Iraqi soldiers like coming through hospitals and taking babies out of incubators and throwing them on the floor. Funny thing about that is on this Wikipedia article, the very first sentence is the Nayara testimony was a false testimony given before the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus. Just like flat out. It's not even like ambiguous at this point that like, oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like even Wikipedia, the most generalized public opinion forum, is just like, yeah, false testimony. Didn't happen.
Yeah. It's not a debate.
Completely used as a propaganda leverage to promote a fucking war.
And if you want to know more about why that war is there,
what
were you saying, Pat?
Hearts and minds. You appeal to emotion by making people think that babies are getting tossed out of incubators so that they can die on the ground.
Won't someone think of the imaginary children?
And then the recourse to that is just bombing people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as if like anybody was helped afterwards.
The liberal outrage sentiment. You outrage them about babies dying, and then you kill babies for years systemically.
Yeah, what was her name? She died like a couple years ago, and like the interviewer was asking her like, was like the millions of Iraqi children dying worth it? And she was like, yeah, it was.
Yeah, I forget. I sometimes forget like General Warhawk names.
It's definitely a hard universe to try and like not only just like wrap your head around without just like, you know, just being exhausted, but also to remember all the various different names, and they're all like old as fuck. But you know, it's funny that like, you know, how big was even the retraction for this? I think that like if you scroll down a little bit, it even like goes over how it was retracted, but by the time they were retracting this testimony, right, the war already had like 60 something percent of public approval and was like already like well underway.
Yeah, and this is such a huge point here, because what we're looking at now that occurred in 1990, this process of putting out just some kind of like salacious and unverified claim into the public opinion pool and then retracting it quietly when the damage has already been done. This is like a microcosm of what happens today, because this happened in 1990 when there was no internet. This happens on such an extreme degree now that the things like these memes or like these articles or these random pages that are just like, hey, this happened, it gets shared by millions of people. And then if you go to the source, it may say something along the lines in the source, like, oh, this has been retracted. But the thing is, that thing that's being circulated around Facebook or Instagram or Twitter doesn't reflect that. And the damage has already been done. The public opinion has already been altered.
That's the same with abortion petition on behalf of people that can't debunk the myths. Yeah, well, I mean, that's exactly what all of our media is. That's like what this book talks about, is that like, you know, these news media, right, it's not the telling you what you can and cannot think, right? That's not how any of this works. You know, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all of it, right? Like none of it tells you exactly what to think, right? But public opinion has been shaped in such a way that like to think outside of it, right? And this goes back to conspiracy, right? To think outside of that, you get labeled as such, right? People will often confuse like, you know, the analysis of someone, you know, like me and Pat, right, with opinions held by somebody like Alex Jones or something, just because there is a tiny kernel, right? There's just the tip of the iceberg, right, that we share, right? And the rest of it, just we split paths like immediately in terms of like, you know, the reason for these lies, these narratives that, you know, are spun to us, and like, you know, the actors behind them, right? You know, I think like Michael Parenti, there's this one video, I was trying to see if I could find it before, where he talks about like, you know, these men in a room where like people always like, you know, say like, what do you think that like, you know, it's a bunch of men in a dark room, you know, with a cigarette smoke wafting everywhere, you know, like talking about these things and controlling the economy and, you know, all these nefarious plans and stuff. He's like, no, I think that like they're all on a carousel, you know, they're all on a carousel just speaking to one another. And he's like, no, yes, of course they're in a fucking room. Right? Probably a well lit room, if anything.
Here's something that I just wanted to bring up, and thank you for going off on that merry-go-round tangent while I pull this up. This is something that's like a more contemporary example of that same thing that happened in 1990, where something fraudulent or even just unverified, maybe it wasn't even intentionally disseminated to, you know, mislead people, but in this age, it's so much more detrimental because it's spread through so much more of like a personalized medium. And this is an example of this that I recently saw regarding the Ukraine war, which I'm not nearly educated enough to make like any kind of really, you know, concrete predictions or statements on, but just this one media source I do want to bring up here. Let's see. This was a Reuters article that I saw being shared around on Facebook by a lot of people. It was going through political groups and various things, and the root link didn't reflect that this is actually incorrect and has been withdrawn. it was regarding something about bodies with, it was about like a mass grave, like an alleged mass grave that was unearthed in an area of, I guess, Ukraine. And they were saying that it was a site of a massacre during the Russian invasion. Regardless if that happened or not, this specific, whatever evidence that they had to share this one that got shared among individuals extensively was, I think, within a day or two retracted and said that we actually have no evidence of that. So whether they did it intentionally or not, I'm not going to make any grand conspiratorial claims here, but regardless, we need to look at like the damage to public opinion that happens when things are like flippantly shared into a social media landscape where every individual just has like the ability to just hit that share button, hit that share button, hit that share button, hit that share button. And then we have public media probably public opinion irreparably altered by the consumption of that headline, not like anything further, just the headline as they scroll past it. And then I would imagine 90% of the individuals that read it will never get the information that was retracted and there was no actual verification for that claim.
Pat, I just threw up another link in the chat. So this goes to, yet another operation.
Did you want me to pull it up? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So just even looking at like the title of the article itself, right? And looking at like, the way it's worded, right? In such a way, it doesn't immediately like, state that, like, if you're going by the headline alone, it's not gonna. Is it not showing for you too?
Hold on, I got it. Let me just put it in. Man, we're in some real deep state censorship already.
The COD fight the ghost of Kiev or whatever. Kiev. Kiefer. It's the ghost of Kiefer.
Ghost of Sutherland has entered the chat.
Were you able to pull it up?
Yeah, give me 1 second, man.
All right. Chomsky talks about how they establish the parameters of what free discourse can occur, like free speech zones. Exactly.
There you go.
Right. So this was like a big story, right? That like, I distantly remember, right? So look how far you have to go from the headline, right? Because you think about it. I mean, nobody's reading like anything other than the headline, right? People are sharing this like on social media, probably. Gaddafi supplies troops with Viagra to encourage mass, sexual assault. Claims
especially that's what our media consumption is now, is headlines. Like, I would imagine that most of the time a news article, people read the headline and do not investigate any further. Prior to the internet, if you did a news story or a newspaper article on something, you had to further elaborate. Now, just the headline is so strong and so influential that you can make an extremely misleading headline, and then it just gets disseminated and shared over such thousands and thousands, if not millions of people are impressed by it.
Trying to see how far down into the article it goes before it's like, this is not credible, right? Because look at the language that's used in here, right? Foreign affairs specialists expressed skepticism about both claims, right? Raises one of the evidence, blah, 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 including snipers shooting children. She was trying to persuade doubters that Libya was not just a civil war and that Gaddafi was encouraging human rights abuses. Russia and China, because of course we got to drag, this is 2011, right? We're dragging Russia and China, have complained that the military strikes on Libya are going beyond the UN mandate. And they kind of did. The U.S., well, unless you understand what the UN is actually for, the U.S. role in Libya, though limited, has also provoked a debate in Washington over whether Obama is ditching his pragmatic foreign policy in favor of so-called liberal intervention, basically fighting just wars. The Defense Secretary Robert Gates, one of the bulwarks against liberal intervention, is to retire at the end of June. Right? So I'm trying to figure out.
While we're on the topic, if anybody is interested in reading about Libya, especially in the current climate of like, we are kind of looking at like, what is NATO as an organization? What does NATO do? What has NATO done in the past? What is the precedent set for NATO involvement in foreign affairs? This book by Maximilian Forte, is called Slouching Towards Sirte, NATO's War on Libya and Africa. This is a very, very, very interesting book regarding that topic. Also, I believe Vijay Prashad has a book on the topic as well called Arab Spring, Libyan Winter, I believe it's called. I actually don't own a copy of that, and I have not read it, but I'm almost positive. Yes, Arab Spring, Libyan Winter by Vijay Prashad. That also covers the topic.
Scroll down just a little bit further, because there's this part that says, the State Department said it has credible information, but would not elaborate.
And there's no link in here that of what that would be or anything like that. And for anyone that wasn't here maybe earlier in the stream where we went over the specific nature of CIA black propaganda and how that's disseminated, is that you can regularly see these unattributed quotes or these unattributed testimonies from anonymous sources will be either known or unknown CIA propaganda agents that are providing that. And again, if you go up in the chat, I did provide a copy of the CIA Inside the Company book by Philip Eggy if you want to read about that further.
I have a copy of the Little Green Book, The Little Proletariat, and I don't know if we're going to be going into that kind of theory. I think that we're going to probably stick closer to historical related books, history more than anything, right? But it's definitely something supplemental that I'll at least give it a shot. When we do wind up covering that book that Pat was talking about. Yeah, I would love to another school, you wouldn't know her. But it's just the sources, just trust me, bro.
Yeah.
And
swear to God.
Just without having to pull up too much, I know that Idan Simpson has done a couple deep dives on Libya, right? But a handful of things that Gaddafi was, doing, just not just domestically, which was giving his people free housing, free education, free healthcare. I believe that food, was a right, within Libya. Pat, you even knew somebody that had grown up and lived in Libya, right?
Me?
Yeah, didn't you tell me you met a guy that was or is it? Am I thinking of our mutual friend that talked about?
Other friend.
So but internationally, right, or at least within the context of Africa, Gaddafi was working towards uniting Africa economically under a gold-backed universal standard within Africa, right?
Well,
what?
And whatever criticism you want to levy against Gaddafi, which I think that there are many legitimate ways that you can criticize Muammar Gaddafi and who he was as a person and how he ran his country. Kind of an indisputable fact, even with all that being considered, he saw he died. Exactly. Yeah. Off the rails gaming.
Just the most smug, horrible thing.
Absolute nightmare that is Libya following the overthrow of Gaddafi is, by almost every single metric, worse. The average life of the life of an average Libyan today and since that conflict has been so much is at so much lesser of a quality than when Gaddafi was instituting certain policies to
ruling with an iron fist.
Right.
But here's the other thing is how much sense does it make that this man ruling with an iron fist, right, is trying to bring in all of these other countries? And sure, you could argue that he would have probably tried to assume some kind of leadership position or something. The real point is that he wanted the rest of the world out of Africa. It's one of the most resource rich continents in the world, right? And it's not under the what would you call it, under the jurisdiction of AFRICOM, that Africa is any more economically stable, right? It's not as if that France or America, right, or any of the Canadian mining companies. That's right, Canadians, right? You're part of this too.
Canadians. I know what you're doing in Guatemala.
I know what you're doing
Canadian
in Guatemala.
mining companies are huge in Guatemala. I learned that while I was there. that a lot of the capitalist penetration into Guatemalan resource markets are actually Canadian companies.
Yeah, and it's like, I bet that Canada is offering the same kind of freedom of that TRRS heads know what's up.
Is that Trudeau or something?
No. That's Rob Rousseau right there. That's famous Canadian streamer. Rob Rousseau. He's great, man. So like, I think that are you
gonna get our own emotes someday?
Yeah, no, we definitely got to get our own emotes. In fact, if anything, chatters, we do have a Discord that's open. It should be right below this video. Check it out. It's kind of bare bones right now. We're still getting off the ground. But help us fill up the community, give us your feedback, we got
if we can get to affiliate status, you guys can have your own emotes.
All right. So that means that I'll be streaming for 148 hours or something.
No, partner. That's partner. That's a lot harder. But affiliate will be pretty easy. We just need to have consistently 10 people viewing the stream every week.
Just you wait. We're gonna get there. All right.
We got to spread democracy with guns.
You got to spread the word.
The effective way of spreading democracy is when you just murder and pulverize any dissenting opposition to liberal capitalism.
Yeah, and it's
what is it that Henry Kissinger said about Chile? He's like, I'm not going to let a country go communist just because of the stupidity of its own people or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Hold on.
The U.S. assassinates anyone who petitions for freedom and independence. We hear plenty about Libya and nothing about Burkina Faso. Actually, wait, I'm pretty certain that Burkina Faso has been in the news lately because I think Blaise, they've convicted him, but isn't he already dead?
Blaise Compaoré died, yeah.
Yeah, so I believe he was recently convicted post, not partum, posthumously, right? Posthumously.
Yes.
Yeah. So and yeah, it's there's also some interesting history. I don't know if we'll ever be able to touch on that. I don't know if we'll be able to find a resource good enough that's actually citing good sources about the relationship between Libya and Burkina Faso at the time that Thomas Sankara was in power. With a lot of public support. But it's one of those situations a lot God damn it, from Grenada. Was it Maurice Bishop? I believe his name was.
Bishop.
Yeah, Bishop. He an amazing orator, an amazing man, and I wish that the world got to see more of what he was trying to accomplish in the Caribbean. I'm abstention.
He might have meant in they might have meant in abstention.
In abstention. Yeah, because I think he fled too before he died. Blaise Compaoré. But yeah,
how about this?
What? I don't see why. I don't see why we need to stand by, or should I do it in my best Henry Kissinger impression?
I don't even know what that dude sounds like.
He's what? He's German, right?
What? No,
I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist.
Just read it in Sean Connery.
Is it coming out Scottish? Should I just do I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its people. The issue is much too important for the Chilean voters to be left to decide for themselves.
Oh, shit. That was so funny. I'm so happy. Got a Henry Kissinger quote narrated by Sean Connery.
Narrated by Sean Connery meets Bane.
Yeah, but this is what Off the Rails Gaming was throwing out there, and also was touched on by Little Proletariat. Is this this concept of we are bringing democracy, and then you have one of the greatest, I would say one of the most significant architects of U.S. foreign policy, Henry Kissinger being like, I don't see why we need to stand by and let a dumb country make some kind of dumb choice to do something. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to stand by and let them decide that for themselves. Like, you know, it's totally saying, it sounds like Bane. It's totally saying the quiet part out loud, which I appreciate Henry Kissinger for providing that. I don't know how much we want to, if we're just I'm kind of out of the material do you want to hear something very hideous about Henry Kissinger?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to, for those of you that don't know, we do have a Facebook page
Yes.
for Subversive History.
Link that?
And that's actually where this all really began, was a Facebook page that kind of just does random you know, history related anti-imperialist content. And there's one specifically on here regarding Kissinger in Chile. That's Che Guevara is relatively intelligent for a Latino.
Irish?
Yeah. Here it is. Let's see if I can pull this up without. I'm actually just going to screen crop this, I think. Yeah, I'm going to do it like that. I'm sorry. I just don't want my own Facebook information available to you cretins.
Don't dox yourself, Pat.
Yeah, exactly.
I fucking love this stream. The dynamic between y'all is dope, and y'all clearly know what you're talking about. I'm gonna be lurking, but I'm here to get y'all to affiliate. Thank you so much, little proletariat. We thank you so much. Yeah, no, me and Pat, we've been friends for close to 10 years now. Over 10 years. Sorry. But yeah, it's been like, you know, quite a journey for me and him, you know, these last 10 years.
We met each other well before any kind of like political awakening.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, we knew each other prior, and then like many years later, we kind of like just like hadn't talked for a while. Like, oh, just regular, like, oh, hey, what's up, man? And it's like, wait, like, are you down? And then like it kind of like completely. I
think like my Facebook like banner, right, was like this like labor wave, like, you know, it was like the Marx, Engels, Lenin, you know, Stalin, but like CCP or whatever, or CCCP in the fucking banner or something. And Pat messaged me, he's like, yo, what's up with that? Are you down with like
so just kind of like off of like what I was saying, you know, there's obviously an entire
that is blurry as fuck. There we go. It was starting to clear up.
Hold on. I didn't mean to share it like that.
For the little proletariat and for any lurkers in chat and stuff, you know, that are just like, bro, how am I supposed to read all this shit? How the fuck
We're
am
not
I
gonna read all of it?
supposed
I just want to throw something out here about
no, not this. I'm not talking about your post. I'm just saying, like, for the material that we cover in general, I think that like reading a lot of the times is like a very monumental thing, and to be honest, I struggle with it too. Like, Pat is definitely more well read than I am. I am an example of how far you can get through just like literally fucking Twitter, fucking podcast, book, audio books and shit like that. Like, as far as just straight up reading, right, for me, right, just a tip to help you get through like a lot of this reading if you want to do it independently and not just like, you know, listen to old VODs, you know, or listen to like, you know, podcasts that like all recommend like Citations Needed, right, or Multipolarista with Ben Norton and stuff like that, or even old, you know, episodes of like Pearls of the Round Table, right, or their follow-up podcast, what is it, Inventing the Future, right? Look, any way you can get this information in there, right, is what works for you. And, you know, if you have to sit down with a book and you're feeling kind of overwhelmed or something, maybe throw on, like, you know, if you can find an audio version of it while you're reading, break out the highlighters and stuff like that. You know, if it's a PDF, you know, definitely like get like the free version of Adobe or something and just use the highlight function on there. Highlight the stuff that jumps out to you, you know, like, you can do it. I have faith in you.
Just to kind of build off of the whole Kissinger trash stream that we're going on. I think that most people with like a very surface level knowledge of CIA operations are probably familiar with the Chilean coup that happened in 1973, which disposed socialist President Salvador Allende and replaced him with the fascistic military general Augusto Pinochet. We can go into. I'm not even going to continue to go into the proceeding events that occurred after that. That's for another stream, another topic, and requires a lot more reading. But in the coup itself, obviously, a lot of people died because of the coup, and then also. During this time, there was after Pinochet assumed power, he went on a repressive rampage, just rounding up anyone that was like a supposed leftist or communist sympathizer and putting them through either execution or disgusting torture, which is mentioned in such gross, disgusting detail in various sources that I'm not even going to, for terms of service reasons, I'm not even going to bring them up here. But
they converted a soccer stadium
into like a torture, an ad hoc torture center. Yeah.
Torture/execution center.
Exactly. And actually, funny thing about that is that the Soviet soccer team was supposed to play there and they refused, and Chile won the game because in protest, the Soviet soccer team wouldn't play in that exact same, helicopters. Anytime you see some fucking chud posting helicopter memes, I love doing this. It's like a sport for me. Is that anytime I'm online and see some chud posting a helicopter meme, I like to just immediately comment and be like, do you mean Augusto Pinochet? And then first of all, 9 times out of 10, they don't know who that is. And then if they actually do know who it is, put them to task and be like, so you're evoking the legacy of Augusto Pinochet?
A guy who hired a Nazi.
Well, and not only that,
just his government.
It creates like an absolute contradiction and a hypocrisy, because anything that they could be saying to like the reason that they would dehumanize communists to the degree that where you should send them on helicopter rides it was absolutely carried out by Augusto Pinochet. So like whatever they think, like, this whole like, oh, there's no political dissent, there's no free speech, you get executed for speaking your mind, that's why we don't like, well, now you're posting fucking memes that are literally celebrating that exact fucking process. So good job, Dick.
And one more thing, right, before we go on to the rest of the thing, right? Anytime they do try to say that, like, oh, Augusto Pinochet like fixed the errors of that socialist, that won a democratic election, right? Remind them that after he got rid of all of the things that Allende like put into place, right? They wound up having to put them back in place afterwards because, for all the libertarians out there, when you get rid of all of like the safety nets for like people to use to have like a happy, healthy, normal life, right? Everything goes downhill. Your entire productivity goes downhill. Your economy goes to shit. Nobody wants to, like, literally, like, so yeah, Allende, even in death, was right, and a socialist, was right again.
So, in this like massive wave of repression that saw thousands and thousands of people die or be tortured, there was actually some American journalists in Chile at the time that were there to like document Salvador Allende's socialist experiment in Chile. One of these individuals was named Charles Gorman. Charles Gorman was labeled a leftist sympathizer and ended up going to the torture chambers and lost his life. Following the coup d'etat, Gorman would be identified as a supporter of Allende and thus labeled a foreign extremist and leftist sympathizer. 6 days after the coup, Gorman would be detained by Chilean military officers and transferred to the National Stadium of Santiago, which would serve as an ad hoc prison and torture center. Gorman would be summarily executed on September 19, 1973. According to later disseminated State Department memos, U.S. intelligence may have played an unfortunate part in Gorman's death. At best, it was limited to providing or confirming information that he helped motivate his murder by the government of Chile. At worst, U.S. intelligence was aware that the government of Chile saw Gorman in a rather serious light, and U.S. officials did nothing to discourage the logical outcome of GOC paranoia. So this is what I have here, and this is specifically where we bring it to our friend Henry Kissinger, right? So after this innocent American citizen died in a coup that was orchestrated and funded and directed by the United States State Department, the U.S. State Department, signed directly by Henry Kissinger, sent a bill to the kid's parents back in the United States saying that, like, yo, we need $9,000 to ship this body back to you. So here's reasons to buy us the money. So if you look right here, I actually have a copy of the document. This is to confirm the telephone conversation of March. Here, I'll read it off of here. This is to confirm the telephone conversation of March 21 between Mrs. Horman and the DS Candy of the department, informing you of the government of Chile's decision to approve your request for the release of the remains of Charles Horman for return to the U.S. in order for the American Embassy at Santiago to arrange shipment. You will recall that a deposit of $900, I'm sorry, it was $900, not $9,000, is required to cover the estimated cost for preparation of the remains and transportation to New York City. Additionally, please provide the name of the funeral home where you want the remains to be shipped. Funds and instructions should be sent to the Office of Special Consular Services, Department of the State. Please accept our deepest condolences in this tragic affair. Director, Special Consular Services, Department of State, Washington, D.C., Henry Kissinger. So not only do you foment a coup with all knowledge that people are going to die, but when an American citizen inadvertently loses his life during that operation, you hit up the parents for $900. You can't even cop the cost of sending the poor kid's body back to his parents. Henry Kissinger is coming with a fucking telegram being like, yo, we're going to need $900.
And you know that body is like fucked up. Like, you know that he wasn't just like, you know, right in the back. He was like probably like beaten, tortured, you know, and died some grisly fucking horrific end.
Yeah, that was not the methodology of that football stadium at that time by any very, very, very grotesque torture methods that were being conducted there during that time.
With some like Jakarta method, like Indonesia shit.
Yeah, maybe even worse. Honestly, the things that I read about what the tactics that were utilized there are. Like, I want to say them, but I don't even think they're appropriate for terms of service. There was sexual. So, yeah,
I'll try to get to, without describing in detail, right? Like, if you do want to read the Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins, I think it is. They had to kill so many people, right, that they didn't have enough manpower to do it, and they didn't have the industry that, like, let's say, like, you know, the 1930s and 40s Germans had, you know, along with all the other countries that participated in that, like, very horrible thing, to the point where, like, they were doing it at like literally like a production line style. Like, that's how gruesome it was. I think there's that movie, what is it, like, there's like a movie about it where they literally interview people that took part in it.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. You're talking about for Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a very acclaimed film about that. In the meantime, just that little piece of trivia that I brought up.
It's called The Act of Killing.
The Act of Killing, right? Soccer match that disgraced Chile were called 40 years later. And this is back in 1973. The coup cast a pall over the entire country. A few weeks after the coup, Chile's national soccer team faced a playoff game against the Soviet Union in Santiago. The winner would go to the 1974 World Cup in Germany. The loser would stay home. The match was to be held in Chile's national stadium in Santiago, but there was a problem. In the weeks since the coup, the Chilean military had transformed the stadium into a detention camp. Some 7,000 political prisoners were being held there. The Soviets got wind of this and refused to play in a stadium they said was stained with blood. The accusation was, of course, denied by Pinochet's military junta. So soccer's governing body, FIFA, stepped in to mediate. It sent representatives to Santiago to inspect the national stadium. They kept us down below, hidden in the locker rooms and in the tunnels. We were kept inside because there were journalists following FIFA officials. It was like we were in two different worlds. Somehow, FIFA representatives didn't manage to see a single one of the detainees. FIFA gave the Chilean stadium a clean bill of health and decreed that the match would go ahead. The eyes of the world were on Chile. The symbol of a stadium turned into a concentration camp was like the worst propaganda for the dictatorship. The awful image went around the world, and the stadium became a metaphor for Chile's dictatorship. High above the stadium, the scoreboard read Chile 1, Soviet Union 0, because the Soviet Union refused to partake in the game. And in oh, here it is. 10 weeks after the coup, in an almost empty stadium, the Chilean players came out to the field. They had no opponent. As threatened, the Soviet team didn't show up. The Chileans kicked off, dribbled down the field, and shot into an open net.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, another happy episode of Subversive History. You know, I think that like we're gonna probably start like winding it down. You know,
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for that. I'm getting hungry.
Right. You know, I think that look,
We're coming back on Sunday.
we are definitely coming back on Sunday, right? I think we're gonna probably try and shoot for the same time, around like 6 o'clock, right? We'll have like half an hour of the next part of that, like Parenti opener that we had, right? And if anything should change, like the time or anything like that, like we'll definitely share it on our Twitter. We'll share it on the socials, and the Facebook is linked in our about, right, along with our Twitter. So you can follow us on Twitter and definitely follow us on Facebook if you are so inclined. Trying to think like what else do we have. We also have a Discord, like I said before, that like we do kind of need to fill out, and I think at some point we're going to start having maybe like a little miniature library going on in there, of not even just like the books that we talk about, right, but maybe even some like peripheral type stuff, and also like feel free to add to that, like when we set it up. We definitely want to create like a community that like shares the knowledge and shares the information that we find, right? We definitely want to instill like that kind of journey that like Michael Parenti like inspires a lot of us to do, and whether like you're a big like Noam Chomsky fan, or Vijay Prashad, or Michael Parenti, or any of this stuff, the point is like we're trying to build a bridge between everybody that feels like what is going on here, what is going on in this experiment needs a little bit more criticism, needs a little bit more truth in it. And I think that has a lot to do with like where our name comes from. If you want to tell our chatters that are here, Pat, real quick, like where does the name Subversive History come from?
I thought I was inspired to the name Subversive History when I was reading history of Guatemala, and the dictator which ruled Guatemala prior to the revolution in the late 1940s was named oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking on this name right now.
What is it, Ubico or whatever?
Yeah, Jorge Ubico. I was reading about his laws, that his like dictatorial laws to like root out subversives, which essentially just means like socialists, communists, leftists of any kind, and that's where I was inspired to kind of use that as a label for the subversive history.
So I think chatters, right? If you want to be a subversive, right? Spread the word. Tell the other people in the Discord, right? About our little Twitch stream. Hopefully we'll like maybe at some point we can add more days, right? And our next stream will hopefully be a little bit longer. If anything, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, if I can quit my job and quit going to school full time and quit working full time, you can. I'll definitely be on here a lot more.
Oh, it's not even, and we're not even just gonna stop at Twitch, right? Like if you spread the word like enough, right? Like ultimately what we hope to do, right, at some point with this Twitch stream is not just go over subversive history, right? But we want to actually like invite people, right, onto this stream, right? And not even just invite people onto the stream, but we actually want to go to the places where this history happened, and we want to be able to like speak to people in these places where these things happened, right?
We can do a stream of my footage from India. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, no, we're definitely gonna have to get to India, because
I was
like
just there.
keep yes, Pat was just there, and fingers crossed, right? Pat's going back, and he's bringing a cameraman this time.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's definitely going to be one of our soon coming streams. Is definitely going to document my experience at the Kerala Communist Party of India Marxists Congress, which I attended, and I interviewed several individuals there directly from India. So that should probably be one of our next streams, in the next couple weeks. So definitely check that out, because I have a lot of very intimate, very firsthand footage of myself attending that conference, which was huge, which is one of the largest political things that I've ever seen, political gatherings I've ever seen in my entire life. Even if you're imagining it in your head, I think you're still going to be astounded when you see the footage.
Yeah, it literally is. If you're like me and you're just like a big old
Imagine an
sap.
American sports team winning a championship, but then like just put a bunch of hammer and sickles everywhere.
Imagine if like the Phillies actually won the World Series, right? But it was in India. And
there in 2008 when that happened, and it was comparable against in India.
So like, you know, imagine if that happened, right? Except it was in India and like the Phillies were actually like a communist party or something like that. It literally will bring tears to your eyes. You know, if you're a big old sap like me, you know, like, you know, look, I'm hoping that like we're going to be able to do a lot, you know, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to, you know, meet a lot of people along the way and invite a lot of people, right? We have guests from like almost every walk of life, you know, and it's not just going to be like international stuff. It's going to be people from right here in the Imperial Core. You know, I want to invite people on from every background to be able to discuss like, you know, the history of, you know, not just like socialism, but also like of First Nation sovereignty. I want to invite on people, you know, that can discuss the history, you know, of LGBT, you know, history, right? That like a lot of times is right there alongside like the socialists and the trade unionists and, you know, everybody in American history. I think it's going to be really fun. I think that like, you know, this is going to be really interesting. And it's going to take a little bit of time, but anything good does, you know?
Yeah, and if you want to see like some of like the past content that I've written and produced a little bit of over the past 6 or 8 months, check out the Facebook, because that's where this all was first established. That's where there's been like some semi-regular updates being made and several semi-regular historical essays that I've written on various topics. That's where the largest base of followers that we have is at the moment. So definitely would be cool if you want to give that a like. Check out some of the old content. Check out the Twitter, which it literally has nothing on it. Or I think might have added some stuff to that. But yeah, this is growing. We're trying to definitely contribute more to the live aspect of having this conversation. And also, you know, like I said, I'm pretty busy. I work full time. I'm in school full time, and now I'm trying to dedicate quite a bit of time to this. So, you know, sometimes keeping up with the Facebook page can be a little difficult, but I'm trying to attack this from multiple fronts and really establish ourselves more significantly in this sphere. So any help or following and liking and subscribing, but check that out would be really cool.
Thank you, Red Scary. Hopefully you make the next one. It'll hopefully be even longer and, you know, even more hot takes will ensue.
Too hot, you know what I mean? I think we kept it pretty political.
Yeah, yeah, pretty tame for now.
Yeah,
you know, it'll be great, and you know, hopefully we'll also be uploading these soon to YouTube.
Oh, the Sankara note. Yes,
hell yeah! I'm telling you, man, we just gotta make an affiliate.
It's funny how tiny it is, and I'm like, oh, there he is.
there he is. There's my guy.
That's my guy. Maybe I'll wear my
actually. Maybe we should do like movie nights at some point. You know, we could watch like Upright Man or something.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Or we can go over Thomas Sankara Speaks. Sankara Speaks book, which is a book that I have that I, you know, obviously can lend you, and if you don't have it already, and we can go over that. Which, you know, I don't think there's a topic that I'm more excited to cover than the life and history and tragic demise of the man, the myth, the legend, the upright man, the upright myth, the upright legend, Thomas Sankara.
It's the greatest. All right, folks.
Yeah, I'm tired. It's sometimes mentally exhausting to try to keep this volleyball in the air for 3 hours. I'm sure that there's some people like whatever, like Hassan Piker or something like that have conditioned themselves mentally to doing this, but I literally worked a 9-to-5 job and then was on here at 5:30 preparing for this, and now it's 8:30 and I'm very hungry.
Yeah, neither of our uncles owns like, you know, a large like, you know, news media fucking thing that might possibly be a fucking op, and neither of us have a degree in communication, so we're just fucking freeballing this shit. All right.
What does affiliate mean? Thank you, Frankster says. You've been absolutely awesome. But what is affiliate? What does that mean?
It means like, I don't know, like we get subscribers and shit, and we have to like shill for people to, you know,
No, so on Twitch. On Twitch, there are specific privileges you get depending on like how many viewers you have and how popular you are. So the first level is affiliate, it's pretty easy to get, and then the next level up from that is partner, which is a lot more difficult to get, but I think we could definitely do it.
We're coming for those privileges.
We're coming for them, all right? And then we're gonna get like partner, and then we're gonna be able to like fucking go to Kerala and shit. We're gonna go to Guatemala, and we'll like find a way to sneak this felon into Canada.
I'm not even tripping on visiting first world countries. Like I've left the country like 10 times or something like that, and I've never been to Europe. I've never been to Canada. Everywhere I go has been in Latin America or Asia, and it's like, first of all, it's like monetarily, it just doesn't even make sense. Like, why would I travel to a place that's more expensive to live in than like when I went to India? Getting there is the only expensive part. If you get there, you know what I mean? The food, lodging, transportation is so affordable, and it's so much cooler than visiting, I don't know, France or something. I'd love to visit France. I'm just kidding, but India is the shit.
And look, if we go to Canada, yeah, we'll probably meet up with like a couple TRRS people, but like, you know, we'll more than likely at least be there to like interview somebody from like, you know, whatever First Nation that like we're there to interview, because that's what I would want to go there for. Fuck Communist Party Canada. I'd rather interview somebody from like the Algonquin Nation or some shit.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Obviously, I have a lot of footage and experience where I spent 6 weeks in Guatemala, and then in the same year I spent 6 weeks in India. Both of these I had an extremely not just simply touristic aims, but I took a lot of footage of certain things. I interviewed several people. So hopefully we can find a way to translate that, because I've been so busy that I haven't been able to really produce like a massive project like that. But I'm sitting on a lot of great information about Guatemala, past and present issues, and then like a very, very interesting series of interviews and footage that I had about the communist movement in Kerala, which I documented firsthand on my own dime. So hopefully that will soon materialize into something fit for public consumption. But you know, we're taking baby steps because I'm a very busy and tired man.
All right, let's let Pat go to sleep. You know, I'm sure my wife is probably wondering what the fuck I've been doing for like 3 hours. Catch you all Sunday, everybody. All right.
Bye, everybody. Love you. Okay, love you. Bye.
Lal salam.
Lal salam.